The bond between two souls is never a random encounter. Every meeting, every glance, every shared moment carries the quiet rhythm of cause and effect, what Buddhism calls karma, the unfolding of cause, condition, and result. When we speak of husband and wife, we are not only describing a relationship, but also a field of practice, where love becomes the soil for wisdom to grow. Marriage, in its truest sense, is not about fulfilling desire or completing a fantasy. It is a mirror, gently revealing who we are, our patience, our expectations, and the limits of our compassion. Welcome to Moonlight Temple, a space where we listen not just with our ears, but with the heart that seeks peace. Tonight, we will walk together through ancient Buddhist stories and living teachings, learning how the threads of karma and cause and effect weave the mysterious fabric of our closest bonds. You'll discover how mindfulness can transform conflicts into understanding, and how love, guided by wisdom, can become a doorway to freedom. As you listen, breathe softly. Let each word settle like a drop of moonlight upon still water. Perhaps, by the end of this journey, you will see that your partner, and even every challenge in love, is part of the path that helps you awaken. If this space brings you calm and reflection, you're warmly invited to subscribe, stay, and continue your journey with Moonlight Temple, where love, wisdom, and serenity meet. Chapter 1. The meeting was never an accident. Part 1. The story, when two souls meet again. Under the quiet gaze of the moon, there are countless stories that unfold between two people, stories that seem new, yet carry the faint echo of something ancient. Somewhere in that delicate space between chance and destiny, two souls meet again. Not by coincidence, but through the mysterious rhythm of causes and conditions, the invisible thread that Buddhism calls karma. There was once a woman whose heart carried the silent ache of resentment. In another lifetime, long forgotten by memory, but not by energy, she and the man she now called her husband had been enemies. They had hurt each other deeply, wounding with words and pride. This lifetime, they met again, not as strangers, but as lovers, drawn by the magnetic pull of unfinished lessons. At first, their love felt effortless, as if the universe itself had reunited them. He was kind, thoughtful, and attentive. She, gentle and full of laughter. They shared dreams, built a home, and whispered promises under the same stars. But as years passed, small misunderstandings began to grow into storms. The more they tried to hold on to happiness, the more it slipped through their fingers. Arguments came suddenly, sharp and cold. Each time, both felt wronged, certain that the other could not truly see them. One night, after another argument, the woman sat alone by the window. Her heart was weary. In that stillness, she whispered not to her husband, but to the emptiness itself. Why does this keep happening? Why do we hurt each other, even when we love? In the silence that followed, she remembered a teaching she had once heard from a kind monk. People meet to learn. Even pain is a teacher when seen clearly. Something softened inside her. She began to see that every time her husband raised his voice, it stirred in her not just anger, but the echo of an old wound, a wound born from needing to be understood. And every time she retreated into silence, he felt the sting of rejection, a fear he had carried since childhood. Their conflict was not truly between them. It was between the unseen pains they both carried. From that day, she tried something new. When anger rose, she paused and breathed. Instead of reacting, she observed. When he spoke harshly, she listened beneath the words, listening for the hurt that made him speak that way. And slowly, she saw how both were mirrors, reflecting the hidden corners of each other's minds. He, too, began to notice. One evening, as he watched her quietly washing dishes, he felt a strange tenderness arise, a sadness that wasn't heavy, but clear. He realized he had always demanded her to understand him first, yet rarely had he offered her the same understanding. That night, he touched her hand and simply said, "Thank you for staying." In that moment, something ancient between them softened. The wall built over lifetimes began to crumble. The fights did not disappear overnight. No magic erased them, but their hearts began to see beyond the noise of you and me. They started to live with more awareness. They laughed again, but this time, the laughter came from humility, not from escape. They held hands not out of need, but out of quiet gratitude. What once felt like punishment now felt like grace. Their life together was no longer about winning or losing, but about understanding. Every day became a small lesson in mindfulness. When the husband grew impatient, he breathed and watched the feeling arise. Hot, sharp, but impermanent. When the wife felt hurt, she breathed too, sensing how quickly the storm of emotion came and went. They began to notice that beneath all the waves of reaction, there was stillness, a clear space of awareness where love naturally lived. Years later, when their hair turned grey, they often sat in the garden in silence. Sometimes they would recall their early years and smile. What once seemed like bad luck or a difficult relationship now revealed itself as a sacred classroom, a place where both learned patience, forgiveness, and compassion. She once said softly, "If we hadn't hurt each other, we might never have truly seen each other." He nodded, and together they watched the setting sun fade into gold. In that moment, the years of tears, anger, and longing seemed to dissolve into a simple truth. Love was never about getting what one wanted. Love was about awakening. And awakening often comes through the very people who challenge us the most. The Buddha once said, "Our greatest enemies are our greatest teachers." In marriage, that teacher sometimes wears the face of the one we love. Through their imperfections, we are called to see our own. Through their mistakes, we are asked to practice understanding. It is said that when two souls carry unfinished karma, they will meet again, not as punishment, but as an opportunity to resolve what was left incomplete. Like two rivers meeting after a long journey, they merge, swirl, and sometimes clash. Yet all movement ultimately leads them toward the same ocean of awakening. If one looks closely, every relationship carries echoes of this sacred dynamic. Even in the modern world, amidst busy schedules, phones, and quiet misunderstandings, the essence remains. Each connection is a mirror. The more deeply we look, the more we see ourselves. Sometimes, it is easier to love a stranger than the one who shares our home, because strangers do not trigger our old wounds. They do not expose our hidden fears. But the one who walks beside us every day inevitably awakens those sleeping parts of us that still seek healing. When we recognize this, something profound happens. Irritation turns into curiosity. Instead of saying, "Why are you like this?" the heart begins to ask, "What is this showing me about myself?" The story of the husband and wife, in truth, is the story of us all. Each of us meets people who awaken emotions we thought we had mastered: anger, jealousy, pride, fear. But these are not signs of failure. They are invitations to see deeper, to practice gentleness with what is still raw inside. The woman in the story once thought her husband was her burden. Now, she bows inwardly each morning and whispers, "You are my teacher." Not because he is perfect, but because through him, she learns what love without attachment truly means. Their story reminds us that right and wrong are only perspectives of the mind. Beneath all opinions lies the same longing to be seen, to be safe, to be loved. When we understand this, compassion naturally arises. In Zen, it is said, "Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water." In the same way, before understanding, we love through desire and reaction. After understanding, we still love, but now, each act of care becomes a meditation. Each disagreement becomes a mirror. Each word becomes a practice of mindfulness. This is the quiet transformation that takes place when we see that nothing in love is random. The people we meet, the joy we share, the pain we endure, all are doors to awareness. And when we enter through them with patience and humility, every conflict becomes an opportunity for awakening. Love, then, is not something to be perfected. It is something to be seen through. When we see clearly, we realize that no one truly belongs to us, yet everyone we meet belongs to the unfolding of our path. As the night deepens, imagine yourself sitting beside this couple in the garden. The wind moves gently through the trees. The moon rests high above, silent and bright. Within that stillness, something becomes clear. No meeting is ever accidental. Each soul that crosses your path carries a lesson wrapped in tenderness or pain, but always, it is love in disguise, guiding you home. And perhaps, the one you call your partner, the one who tests your patience, who mirrors your fears, who challenges your calm, is not your obstacle, but your most intimate teacher. Because in truth, every heart that touches ours, no matter how briefly or deeply, is helping us remember who we truly are. Part 2. The teaching. Seeing beyond the self. When the Buddha spoke of dependent origination, he described the natural law that nothing arises on its own. Every moment, every emotion, every encounter is born from a network of causes and conditions. A seed becomes a tree because of soil, sunlight, rain, and time. In the same way, a relationship blossoms or breaks because of countless conditions, seen and unseen. What we call love or conflict is not a single event. It is the meeting point of many invisible threads woven through the mind and the world. In the quiet language of Buddhism, this is called pratitya samutpada, the understanding that life is not built from isolated pieces but from interconnection. When we look deeply into our partner, we see our parents, our teachers, our fears, our hopes, and their own. We see that no one truly stands alone. The joy between two hearts and the pain that follows are both the results of conditions we have nurtured knowingly or unknowingly. To see this is to awaken compassion. But the human mind is quick to divide. We judge what we like and what we dislike. We say, "You are right," or "You are wrong," and build a wall between those ideas. The Buddha often reminded his disciples that this is the root of suffering, not the act of discerning, but the attachment that follows. There is a difference between seeing clearly and dividing from ego. To see clearly is to recognize what is wholesome and what is unwholesome without hatred or pride. To divide from ego is to cling, to defend, to fight for identity. When two people argue, it is rarely about the content of the disagreement. Beneath every "you never listen" or "you don't care" lies the wish to be seen and respected. The problem is not the perception itself, but the attachment to my side. When perception becomes self-centered, it blinds us to the interdependence that keeps us connected. But when perception becomes wisdom, it opens into compassion, the ability to see both sides as movements within the same ocean. In this sense, the Buddha never taught that we should erase our differences. Instead, he encouraged us to see their emptiness. Emptiness does not mean nothingness. It means that nothing exists independently. Your anger is not just your anger. It arises from old habits, from fatigue, from childhood memories, from fear. Your partner's impatience is not simply their flaw. It is a symptom of unmet needs, unspoken worries, unhealed experiences. When we understand this, judgment softens. We stop seeing each other as enemies and begin to see each other as conditions in the same web of learning. Imagine a lake disturbed by wind. The waves crash and swirl, but the water itself remains clear beneath. The wind is like craving and aversion, the constant push and pull of wanting and rejecting. When we identify with the waves, we are thrown by every emotion. But when we rest in awareness, the still water below, we can see the movement without drowning in it. This awareness is the space of understanding in a relationship. It allows love to breathe again. The Buddha called this awareness right view. Right view is not an opinion. It is the capacity to see things as they truly are, impermanent, conditioned, and not self. When we hold right view in love, we stop demanding permanence from what is fluid. We stop asking another person to complete what can only be completed through awareness. We love with gentleness, knowing that every joy and sorrow is part of a larger dance of causes and effects. In Zen, there is a saying, the snow falls, and each flake lands in its proper place. Nothing is out of order. The moments of tenderness and the moments of misunderstanding both arise perfectly from the conditions that came before. To resist them is to resist the unfolding of life itself. To see them as teachings is to live in harmony with what is. This understanding transforms relationships. When your partner speaks in anger, you can recognize that it is not a personal attack, but the expression of suffering. When you feel hurt, you can see that your pain is not proof of failure, but a call for mindfulness. Seeing in this way does not mean tolerating harm or erasing boundaries. It means responding from wisdom instead of reacting from fear. Wisdom can still say no, can still protect, can still walk away when necessary, but it does so without hatred. The Buddha once told a disciple, hatred is never ended by hatred, it is ended by love. This is an eternal truth. In a marriage or any intimate bond, this truth becomes a living practice. When you see anger rise in the other, you practice stillness instead of retaliation. When you see your own impatience, you acknowledge it instead of denying it. Every moment of mindfulness weakens the chain of reactivity that binds two people in suffering. Understanding dependent origination also invites humility. It reminds us that we are not the master of the universe. We cannot force outcomes, only participate in conditions. Just as no single cause makes a flower bloom, no single effort guarantees peace. What we can do is nurture wholesome causes, kindness, honesty, and awareness. When these are present, harmony becomes possible, though never permanent. But permanence is not the goal, presence is. A Zen teacher once compared life to a mirror made of countless small fragments. Each person we meet reflects a different aspect of ourselves. Our partner, especially, reflects the parts we most resist, the fears, the insecurities, the desires for control. When we see clearly, we no longer blame the mirror for what it shows. We polish our own heart instead. Every misunderstanding, then, becomes a chance to see where the ego still hides. From the perspective of Dharma, what we call problems in a relationship are actually signals of imbalance in perception. The mind seeks control because it fears change. But love, like all things, changes constantly. To expect it to stay the same is like trying to hold a river still. The more we grasp, the more turbulence we create. When we learn to see through the illusion of control, we begin to float with the current instead of fighting it. This is the heart of non-attachment. Non-attachment does not mean indifference. It means loving fully without clinging. It means caring without the weight of ownership. When we let go of control, we make room for trust, and trust allows love to breathe. In this openness, we begin to understand that the person beside us is not ours, but a fellow traveler on the same path toward awakening. We walk together for as long as the causes and conditions allow, and when the path divides, we bow with gratitude instead of grief. The practice of right view also changes how we experience pain. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" we begin to ask, "What is this teaching me?" This simple shift dissolves resentment. Pain no longer feels like punishment. It becomes guidance. Even heartbreak can be seen as part of the great rhythm of impermanence. When a relationship ends, what truly ends is a set of conditions. The love that was real does not vanish. It transforms into wisdom, into compassion for all who love and lose. This is what it means to see beyond the self. The self says, "I am right, you are wrong." Wisdom says, "We are both learning." The self says, "This shouldn't happen." Awareness says, "This is what's happening. Now, how will I respond?" When we live with awareness, even conflict becomes a form of meditation. We stop running from discomfort and start learning from it. In the story of the couple from before, both discovered this. Shift slowly. They learned to see their anger as weather, temporary, passing. They learned to rest in the clear sky beneath. They realized that they were not separate storms, but two expressions of the same atmosphere, conditioned by each other's winds. This insight did not erase their humanity. It made their humanity sacred. To practice in this way does not require religious labels. It only requires presence. When we pause before speaking, when we breathe before reacting, we are already living the Dharma. In every home, every kitchen conversation, every silent glance, there are countless chances to awaken. Awareness is not found in distant temples, but in the moment you choose to listen instead of argue, to understand instead of blame. As the Buddha taught, the root of all suffering is ignorance, not evil, but unseeing. When we do not see how deeply connected we are, we act as if we were separate. We hurt others, and thus we hurt ourselves. But when we see clearly that no word or gesture stands alone, compassion naturally blooms. Compassion is the fragrance of understanding. So the next time conflict arises, remember the teaching of dependent origination. See the chain of causes that led to this moment. Fatigue, misunderstanding, unmet needs, old fears. See how it all interweaves. Then breathe. Let the awareness of interconnection soften your heart. From that softness, choose your next word or action. That is the way of wisdom in love. The Buddha never promised that awakening would remove all pain. He offered something more profound, the end of unnecessary suffering. The pain of impermanence, of change, will always be part of life. But when we see it through the lens of dependent origination, pain no longer binds us. It becomes the texture of understanding. In relationships, this means that disagreements may still appear, but they no longer destroy the bond. They become reminders to return to awareness. Ultimately, this teaching invites us to love without illusion. To love with open eyes is to accept impermanence. To love with humility is to recognize interdependence. To love with wisdom is to know that the one you call my partner is not separate from the whole of life itself. They are the mirror through which the universe speaks to you, sometimes gently, sometimes painfully, always inviting you to wake up. And when we live with this understanding, something remarkable happens. Even in the middle of ordinary days, while washing dishes, walking through rain, sitting beside one another in silence, there is peace, a quiet knowing that nothing was ever random. Every meeting, every word, every tear was part of the infinite unfolding of love, becoming awareness. Part 3. Reflection and practice, learning through love. When we begin to understand that every relationship is built upon causes and conditions, something inside us changes. We start to look at our daily interactions, not as random events, but as opportunities for awakening. The people closest to us, our partners, family, or friends, become mirrors reflecting our inner world. Every word they speak, every reaction they trigger, helps us see where our heart is open and where it is still closed. In this awareness, the space of ordinary life becomes the ground of practice. This is why the Buddha often emphasized mindfulness in daily living, not only in meditation halls or monasteries. Awareness, he taught, is the bridge between confusion and clarity. It is through awareness that love matures from emotion into wisdom. When we are mindful, we can observe our reactions with tenderness instead of judgment. We notice the flicker of irritation before it becomes a flame, the soft ache of loneliness before it turns into resentment. Awareness allows us to hold these moments gently, as we would hold a fragile flower. The modern world teaches us to fix, control, and explain, but mindfulness invites a different way to listen. Listening, in this sense, is not only about hearing another person's words. It is about being fully present, allowing the moment to reveal itself. When your partner speaks in anger or sadness, try to pause and breathe. Feel the sound, the vibration, the emotion beneath the words. Ask silently, what is this person really trying to say? What pain or longing lives beneath this tone? Such listening transforms communication into understanding, and understanding into healing. In Buddhist practice, this is called seeing with the heart. When we see with the heart, we no longer look for who is right or wrong. We begin to ask deeper questions. What is this teaching me? What habit in me is being revealed? What part of me is being invited to grow? These questions open the door to insight. They shift the focus from blame to learning, from reaction to reflection. A wise teacher once said, "You meet each person to learn one lesson, to love more, and to understand more." It sounds simple, yet it can take an entire lifetime to live this truth. Love without awareness often becomes attachment, a cycle of expectation and disappointment. But love infused with awareness becomes compassion, an energy that sees clearly, accepts fully, and responds skillfully. Imagine a moment when tension rises with your partner. Maybe they forget something important or speak in a way that hurts. In that instant, the mind wants to react, to defend, to explain, to correct. But the practice begins in that very pause, that sacred space before reaction. If you take one breath and bring awareness into that moment, the pattern starts to change. The energy of mindfulness interrupts the chain of anger, and transforms it into curiosity. You might even ask yourself, what can I learn from this feeling? That question alone can dissolve half of the pain. This is the essence of what we might call the practice of shifting the question. Instead of asking, who is right? Or, why are they like this? We ask, what is life showing me right now? This is not about self-blame or spiritual guilt. It is about seeing reality with gentleness. The truth is, every conflict is a mirror. It reflects the parts of us that still cling to certainty, pride, or fear. When we stop fighting the mirror, we start seeing clearly. In practical life, this means cultivating moments of reflection. Once a week, or even once a day, take time to write in a quiet journal. Choose one interaction that felt heavy or emotional. Write down what happened, what you felt, and what you learned. Do not write to justify or condemn. Write to understand. This simple act of reflection turns confusion into wisdom. Over time, you begin to notice patterns, the same triggers, the same stories you tell yourself. Seeing these patterns is already liberation, because what is seen clearly no longer controls you unconsciously. The Buddha compared awareness to light. When a lamp is lit, the darkness disappears on its own. You do not need to chase it away. The presence of light is enough. Likewise, when we bring awareness to our relationships, misunderstanding naturally fades. What remains is the quiet glow of understanding, not perfect, not grand, but steady and real. When love is guided by understanding, forgiveness follows naturally. Forgiveness is not about pretending nothing happened. It is about releasing the illusion of control. It means recognizing that both you and your partner are shaped by causes far beyond the present moment. Upbringing, trauma, fear, hope, culture. Forgiveness is the wisdom that says, we are both learning, and learning requires mistakes. In the same way a child learns to walk by falling, love learns to stand by stumbling. To forgive is to allow growth. The Buddha's compassion was vast because he understood that everyone is doing the best they can within their level of awareness. When we bring that same insight into our relationships, compassion replaces judgment. The heart relaxes. Zen. Teachers often say, when you understand yourself, you understand everyone. It means that the conflict between two people is rarely about the surface issue. It is about the inner struggle we each carry. If we can meet that struggle with kindness, the entire energy shifts. A conversation that once led to anger now becomes a space for healing. The practice of reflection also means accepting impermanence. Love changes, people evolve, feelings transform. Trying to freeze love in one form, the early passion, the comfort, the idealized image, leads to suffering. When we embrace impermanence, we begin to love more freely. We stop demanding that another person stay the same, and we start celebrating their growth. Even when love takes new shapes, the essence remains, the wish for the other's well-being. One day, your partner may not be who they once were, but neither are you. To love wisely is to keep meeting each other anew, as if for the first time. Each morning can be a new beginning, each moment a chance to start over. When we hold love with open hands instead of clenched fists, it becomes alive again. Practicing awareness in relationships does not make life free from pain. There will still be moments of disappointment, misunderstanding, and fatigue. But mindfulness changes the texture of those moments. Pain is no longer seen as an enemy, it becomes a teacher. The same flame that once burned now becomes light. There is an old story of a monk who carried a heavy pot of water up a hill every day. When asked why he did not use a lighter pot, he smiled and said, "The weight reminds me to walk carefully. Our relationships are like that pot. They slow us down, teach us balance, humility, patience. Each difficulty invites us to walk more carefully, to live more consciously." You may notice that love deepens not when everything is easy, but when awareness grows stronger. When two people begin to see themselves clearly, a gentle honesty arises. They can speak without blame, listen without defense, and hold silence without fear. Their connection becomes less about comfort and more about awakening together. This is the beauty of mindful love. It transforms daily life into a living meditation. Cooking dinner, cleaning the house, sitting quietly beside each other. Each act becomes a way of practicing presence. You begin to realize that love does not need to be dramatic to be profound. It is found in the stillness between breaths, in the willingness to stay, in the soft, "I understand," after a storm. Over time, as mindfulness ripens, you start to see that the person beside you is not separate from life itself. They are life expressing itself in a different form. Their laughter, their anger, their silence, all are waves in the same ocean. Seeing this unity dissolves the illusion of me and you. What remains is simple presence, open, aware, and free. So when you next find yourself in conflict, remember to pause, breathe, feel the weight of the emotion in your chest. Instead of asking, "Why are they doing this to me?" ask, "What part of me is being shown right now?" Write it down if you can. Reflect without judgment. Then thank the situation silently for revealing another corner of your mind. This is how practice works, gently, consistently, compassionately. Love in this way becomes an ongoing dialogue between the heart and awareness. It is no longer about possession but participation, participating fully in the unfolding of life, moment by moment. You and your partner are co-students in this sacred classroom, each helping the other awaken. At the end of the day, when the house grows quiet and the lights dim, take a moment to reflect. Think of one thing you understood about yourself today through your connection with another person. Write it down or whisper it in gratitude. Over time, these small moments of understanding accumulate. They become the gentle wisdom that guides your steps, even in darkness. The Buddha said, "To understand everything is to forgive everything." This forgiveness begins not in words, but in awareness, in seeing that everything arises from causes, and everything passes when causes end. Relationships, too, follow this law. When love is nurtured with mindfulness, it becomes a refuge, not a prison. When it fades, it leaves behind wisdom, not bitterness. So let your love be your practice. Let each disagreement remind you to pause. Let each tenderness remind you of impermanence. Let each breath be a return to presence. Because, truly, every relationship is a meeting of souls in search of awakening. And every act of awareness, no matter how small, brings us closer to peace. As this chapter comes to a close, take a gentle breath. Feel your heartbeat, steady, alive, present. Somewhere within that rhythm lies the deepest truth, that love and awakening are not two paths, but one, and that the people who walk beside us, whether for a moment or a lifetime, are never random. They are the living reflections of our own journey back to understanding. You are listening to a gentle teaching from the Moonlight Temple series, wisdom drawn from ancient Buddhist roots, brought to life with care and presence. To fully receive the heart of these teachings, I invite you now to pause. Soften the edges of your day. Let your body rest. Take in a slow, quiet breath and exhale into stillness. Allow your awareness to return, not to the past, not to the future, but to this very moment. Nothing else is required, just your presence. If this offering has brought you a moment of peace, we gently invite you to support this journey by subscribing to the Moonlight Temple, sharing these teachings, or simply returning again when your heart needs rest. Every small act of presence helps this temple of silence grow. Chapter 2: Love and Desire. Part 1: The Story, a Wife's Unconditional Heart. There was once a woman who loved her husband with the kind of tenderness that asks for nothing in return. They lived a simple life near the edge of a quiet village, surrounded by fields that swayed with the wind. Their home was small, but peace lived there. Each morning, she would wake before dawn, light a small lamp, and offer a silent prayer for his well-being. He was a merchant, traveling often, driven by ambition and a hunger for recognition. She, by nature, was gentle, preferring the silence of their garden to the noise of markets and gossip. One year, fortune turned against him. His business failed, and the same friends who had once admired his success began to whisper behind his back. He returned home, defeated, carrying the weight of shame heavier than his empty purse. The once confident man could no longer meet her eyes. He would sit for hours staring at the floor, his heart filled with regret. He began to believe he was worthless, a failure, unworthy of love. In those days, she said little. She simply continued her quiet routine, preparing his meals, tending the garden, lighting incense in the evenings. Her calmness was like a mirror in which his restlessness could see itself clearly. But inside, she was not indifferent. She understood his suffering, even when he could not speak it. Her heart ached for him, yet she knew that pity would only deepen his despair. What he needed was not comfort, but the gentle strength that reminded him he was still whole. One night, a great storm came. The wind tore through the village, breaking roofs and uprooting trees. Their small house began to tremble under the weight of the rain. The husband, still lost in thought, didn't move. The woman ran outside to secure the animals and the roof. The wind was fierce, cutting through her clothes, but she did not stop. As she struggled to tie the ropes, a piece of wood from the roof came loose and struck her shoulder. Pain shot through her body, but she kept going until the house was safe. When she finally returned inside, drenched and trembling, her husband looked at her with shock. For the first time in months, his numb heart began to feel again. He reached out, touched her injured shoulder, and whispered, "Why didn't you call me?" She smiled, her breath soft and shallow. "Because love is not about who suffers more," she said. "It's about holding on until the storm passes." Those simple words opened something in him. He realized how blind he had been, chasing wealth, comparing himself to others, measuring worth by success. He had confused the world's approval with love, and now, as he watched her, he saw a different kind of love, one that did not depend on gain or loss, praise or blame. The storm outside slowly calmed, but the real storm, the one within him, began to settle as well. He saw that her care had never been about possession. She did not love him because he was strong or successful. She loved because her heart was free. Her compassion did not demand repayment. It simply flowed, like rain nourishing everything it touched. Days later, When the sun returned, she sat by the window, her arm still bandaged. The garden outside shimmered with drops of rainlight. He knelt beside her and said, "I have spent my life chasing love, but I see now that I never understood it. I wanted to be admired, not to be seen. I wanted to be needed, not to give." She turned to him, smiling softly. "True love does not make you smaller or bigger," she said. "It makes you real." From that moment, something transformed between them. The silence that had once been heavy became peaceful. They began to rebuild their lives, not from ambition, but from gratitude. He started working again, this time with a lighter heart. Every evening, they would sit quietly together, sometimes without speaking at all. Words were no longer needed. Presence was enough. Years later, when she grew older and her hair turned white, he continued to care for her with the same devotion she once gave him. And when she passed away, he told those who gathered at her memorial, "She never belonged to me, yet she lived in my heart as kindness itself." The people of the village remembered her not as a saint, but as someone profoundly human, a woman who understood that love's truest strength lies not in passion or ownership, but in patience and understanding. This story has been told in many forms across time, for its essence belongs to every heart that has ever loved deeply. It reminds us that love, in its purest form, is not about how someone makes us feel. It is about how we can see another's humanity clearly, their joy, their fear, their imperfection, and still choose kindness. In the Buddha's teachings, this is the distinction between conditional affection and unconditional compassion. Conditional affection says, "I love you because you make me happy." Unconditional compassion says, "I love you because your happiness and my happiness are not separate." The wife in this story did not rescue her husband by changing his circumstances. She rescued him by staying rooted in clarity, by refusing to let suffering turn her heart cold. Her love was not naive, it was wise. She saw through his anger and despair to the wounded humanity beneath. Instead of reacting to his pain, she embraced it with quiet strength. In that stillness, he rediscovered himself. This kind of love does not depend on beauty, success, or even reciprocity. It is the love of the awakened heart, the metta, or loving kindness, that arises when the mind is free from craving. It asks nothing, yet it gives everything. There is a quiet truth in relationships that many forget. The people we love most are not ours to own. They are rivers passing through our life, each carrying their own storms and sunlight. To love them well is to let them flow, to walk beside them for as long as life allows, without chaining them to our expectations. The woman in this story understood this truth, not through doctrine, but through presence. When her husband was lost in despair, she did not withdraw, nor did she try to control his emotions. She simply stayed, quietly aware, embodying the patience that allows transformation to happen naturally. Like the earth that supports both flowers and thorns, her love made no distinction between moments of joy and sorrow. This is the quiet power of love rooted in awareness. It does not rush to fix. It simply holds space for healing. When we love in this way, our presence becomes a refuge for others. People feel safe to be imperfect around us because they sense that our affection does not depend on conditions, and yet, such love is not weak. It requires immense inner strength. To love without possession is to stand in the truth of impermanence, to accept that nothing can be held forever. It is to love as the moon loves the night sky, shining fully yet never clinging to the darkness it illuminates. For the husband, this realization changed everything. He began to see that his wife's kindness was not a reward for his worthiness, but a reflection of her freedom. Her compassion did not make her dependent, it made her vast. In her presence, he learned to soften, to let go of pride, and to rediscover humility. One evening, after many years, he walked alone to the edge of the same field where they had once worked together. The sun was setting, painting the horizon in gold. He closed his eyes and felt the wind move gently across his face. In that moment, he understood what she had meant all those years ago, that love is not about who suffers more or who gives more. Love is the space where both hearts learn to see beyond themselves. He whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude. "May I love as you loved," he said softly, without fear, without holding back. And in that whisper, the whole story came full circle. What began as attachment and ambition ended as surrender and peace. The story of the wife and husband is not only about two people, it is about the transformation of love itself, from the restless need to possess into the stillness of compassion. It is the same journey each of us takes in our own way, learning through joy and loss how to love more freely. When we remember this, love no longer binds us, it liberates us. It becomes a path, a bridge between the ordinary and the sacred. For in every heart that truly loves without condition, the Buddha's teaching lives again. That compassion is not something we do for others, but something we allow to flow through us, like the endless rain that nourishes all things, expecting nothing in return. Part 2. The teaching. The difference between love and attachment. In the quiet language of the Buddha, love and attachment are not the same. They may look alike from the outside. Both can make the heart beat faster. Both can bring tears. Both can draw two souls close. Yet, at their core, they move in opposite directions. One expands the heart, the other contracts it. One liberates, the other binds. True love, as taught in the Dharma, arises from metta, karuna, mudita, and upekkha, loving kindness, compassion, joy in the happiness of others, and equanimity. These four are called the immeasurables because their nature is boundless. They do not depend on who the other person is, what they give us, or how they behave. They simply flow from understanding, from seeing that another being's joy and pain are not separate from our own. Attachment, on the other hand, grows from craving and ignorance. It is not bad or sinful, it is simply unseeing. It says, "I need you to be this way, so I can be happy." It confuses love with possession, care with control. In attachment, we love not the person themselves, but the image of them we want to keep. When they change, we suffer. When they leave, we break. But the breaking is not caused by love, it is caused by our resistance to change. The Buddha once said, "When you cling, you suffer. When you let go, there is peace." This teaching does not mean we must reject relationships or deny affection. It means we must understand what we are holding on to. Love can never cause pain, only attachment can. Love sees, attachment demands. Love embraces, attachment grasps. Imagine a butterfly resting on your hand. If you try to hold it tightly, you crush its wings. If you keep your palm open, it may stay for a while, or it may fly away. But either way, you are at peace. That is the essence of non-clinging love. A love that allows freedom, a love that honors the impermanence of life. In Buddhist philosophy, all things are impermanent, anicca. everything changes, including emotions. The feeling of passion that burns brightly at the beginning of a relationship will fade and transform, just as every fire becomes ash. If we cling to the intensity of the beginning, we will suffer as it cools. But if we understand impermanence, we see that love is not disappearing, it is simply evolving. It becomes quieter, deeper, less about excitement, more about presence. Attachment, however, refuses this natural flow. It says, "Stay the same, be who I want you to be," and in doing so, it fights against the very nature of life. This resistance creates tension, the friction of reality rubbing against expectation. The result is the common suffering of the heart, disappointment, jealousy, fear, and control. When we are caught in attachment, we mistake need for devotion. We tell ourselves we cannot live without the other person, but this is not the voice of love, it is the voice of fear. Love says, "I wish for your happiness, even if it is not with me." Fear says, "I cannot be happy unless you belong to me." One is open, the other is closed. The Buddha used a simple analogy to describe this. A lotus grows in muddy water, yet its petals remain untouched by the mud. In the same way, love can bloom within the world of human desire, but it remains unstained when rooted in wisdom. 2. Love wisely is not to escape emotion, but to see emotion clearly, to feel it without being enslaved by it. This clarity comes from mindfulness. When we are mindful, we can observe desire as it arises. We can see how the mind reaches, how it longs, how it imagines. We notice how the body responds, the tightening of the chest, the flutter in the stomach. And in that seeing, a space opens. We realize that we are not the desire itself. We are the awareness in which desire appears and disappears. When you fall in love, the mind often says, "This is forever." But awareness knows better. This too will change. It does not make the love less beautiful. On the contrary, it makes it precious. To love with awareness is to treasure each moment, knowing it will not last, and to love even more deeply because of that truth. In one of his teachings, the Buddha spoke of the difference between the flame of passion and the warmth of compassion. Passion burns quickly, consuming everything in its path. Compassion, however, is steady and enduring, like the light of a lantern that guides the way. Both give light, but only one can last the long night. Desire is not the enemy, it is a teacher. It shows us where we still confuse possession with peace. Every time we crave, we are being invited to look deeper, to ask, what am I truly longing for? Usually, beneath the desire for another person lies a deeper longing, to feel safe, to feel seen, to feel whole. When we recognize this, we can turn inward and nurture those needs with awareness instead of seeking to fill them through others. This is what it means to transform desire into love. We don't have to suppress it or deny it. We simply have to understand it. When desire is seen clearly, it naturally softens. It stops grasping and starts giving. It becomes tenderness, appreciation, joy, qualities that belong to true love. There is a Zen saying, "When you love, love as the sky loves the clouds, allowing them to come and go." The sky does not chase the clouds, nor does it cling to them when they drift away. It simply remains open, spacious, allowing everything to pass through. This is the mind of non-attachment. It is not cold or distant. It is vast and gentle. In relationships, this understanding can transform everything. Instead of trying to make our partner fit our expectations, we begin to see them as they truly are: imperfect, changing, human, We stop demanding and start appreciating. We no longer love to fill our emptiness. We love to share our fullness. When love is guided by wisdom, it becomes an act of generosity. We give not because we expect something back, but because giving itself is joy. When the heart is full, it overflows naturally. It cannot help but bless others. This kind of love is fearless because it has nothing to lose. It does not depend on being loved in return. It simply is. The Buddha described such love as boundless like the ocean. It holds everything, joy and sorrow, gain and loss, meeting and separation, without drowning in any of it. To love like this is to be free, even while deeply connected. But how do we cultivate this in daily life? We begin where we are. We start by noticing the small moments of attachment, the urge to control, the fear of losing, the expectation of being understood. Each time we notice, we breathe. We do not scold ourselves. We simply see it, smile gently, and release. In this simple act, we are already walking the path of awakening. To love without clinging does not mean to stop feeling. It means to feel everything fully, yet remain aware of its impermanence. It is like watching waves rise and fall. The beauty lies in their movement, not in their permanence. When we stop trying to make them still, we can finally enjoy the ocean. The difference between love and attachment is the difference between a flame and the sunday. The flame flickers, burns, and consumes. The sun shines steadily, giving warmth to all without choosing one over another. True love is like the sun, radiant, impartial, free. It illuminates rather than possesses. In the end, love is not something we find outside ourselves. It is the natural fragrance of a mind at peace. When the mind is free from craving, love blooms effortlessly. It is not forced, it flows. It is not anxious, it trusts. And so, the teaching reminds us, do not fear love, and do not worship desire. Instead, learn to see them clearly. Let love teach you openness, and let desire teach you awareness. Both are part of the same path, pointing toward understanding. When you truly see the difference, you will know this, that love is not what binds you to another, but what frees you both to grow. To love in this way is to live in harmony with life itself. It is to look at another being and silently say, may you be happy, may you be safe, may you be free. This is not only the highest form of love, it is the pure expression of awakening itself. Part 3. Reflection and practice. The art of safe love. There is a quiet truth we discover as we walk deeper into understanding. Love is not something we get from another person. It is something we give through the awareness that flows from within. Yet most of us spend our lives trying to feel safe in love. We seek reassurance, validation, promises. We hold on tightly, fearing loss. We build invisible walls around the heart and call them devotion. But real love, the love that liberates, begins only when we feel safe enough inside ourselves to let go. Safety in love does not come from control. It comes from presence. It is born the moment we stop chasing what is outside and turn inward to care for what is tender within. The Buddha taught that every emotion, even desire and attachment, can become the path of awakening when held in mindfulness. In this awareness, we begin to notice the difference between craving and caring, between the restless urge to own and the peaceful wish to bless. Before we can love another safely, we must first understand the patterns that make love unsafe. The Buddha called these tanha, the thirsts of the mind. They appear as subtle voices within us. I need you to complete me. I cannot lose you. You must make me feel important. These voices are not wrong. They are human. But if left unseen, they create suffering for us and for those we love. There are 3 common signs that attachment, not love, is guiding our hearts. The first is fear, the quiet anxiety that we might lose someone, be replaced, or be forgotten. Fear hides behind many forms: jealousy, overprotectiveness, constant seeking of reassurance. It whispers, "If I don't hold on, they will leave." But the truth is, no amount of holding on can keep what is meant to change. Fear makes the heart narrow, while love makes it spacious. The second sign is control. This shows up as trying to change another person, shaping them into the image we believe they should be. We call it caring, but underneath it is the desire to make reality conform to our comfort. We forget that love's beauty lies in acceptance, seeing someone exactly as they are, not as we wish them to be. When we stop trying to fix another, we begin to listen. And in that listening, true intimacy is born. The third sign is dependency, the belief that without the other person, we are incomplete. Dependency confuses emotional need with connection. It turns love into a transaction. I give so that you stay. But love that needs to be returned to exist is not yet love. It is a contract. Real love asks nothing. It gives because giving is its nature, like a flame offering light or a river offering flow. To see these patterns clearly is not to judge them, but to soften them with compassion. The Buddha never condemned human attachment, he simply illuminated it. He taught that the moment we see our craving with mindfulness, we are already free from being controlled by it. Awareness is liberation. The practice, then, is to notice when fear, control, or dependency appear, and to breathe into them gently, saying, "This too is love trying to find its way home." In modern life, where speed and distraction pull us away from inner stillness, we need reminders to return to this calm awareness. One of the simplest ways to do so is through a short meditation, a practice I call offering safe love. It is a meditation of 5 minutes, yet its essence can transform the entire texture of our relationships. Begin by finding a quiet place. Sit or lie down comfortably. Let your body rest naturally. Take a slow, deep breath in through the nose and exhale softly through the mouth. Feel the air moving through you like a gentle tide. As you settle, bring your attention to your heart area, the space in the center of your chest. Imagine this space as warm light, glowing softly. Now, with each breath, say silently to yourself, "May I be safe. May I be free from fear. May I rest in love that does not cling." Stay with these words for a few breaths. Let them sink into your being, like rain soaking into dry soil. Then, bring to mind someone you care about, your partner, a friend, anyone who stirs emotion within you. Visualize them gently, as if they are sitting before you. Breathe in, feeling the warmth of your heart. Breathe out, and silently send them the thought, "May you be safe. May you be free from fear. May you rest in love that does not cling." You are not trying to control their choices or emotions. You are simply blessing them with freedom, offering them safety instead of ownership. Feel the peace that arises when you no longer demand anything from them. You are no longer pulling, you are offering. After a few moments, extend this blessing outward to others you know, and even to those you struggle with. May all beings be safe. May all beings be free from fear. May all beings rest in love that does not cling. Let the circle widen until it includes even yourself again. For you, too, are worthy of this unconditional peace. When you open your eyes, you may notice something subtle has shifted. The tightness in your chest has softened. The mind feels quieter. You may realize that love was never something to protect or defend. It was the very space in which everything lives and changes. This meditation may seem simple, yet it holds a profound truth. Love becomes safe when we stop trying to possess it. In giving others the freedom to be, we discover our own. The Buddha taught that the highest form of love is upekkha, equanimity. It is not cold or distant. It is the calm wisdom that understands that every being must walk their own path. You can walk beside someone, but you cannot walk for them. You can offer kindness, but not take away their suffering. You can share joy, but not demand permanence. This understanding is the essence of safe love, a love that does not wound itself through clinging. In daily life, this practice shows itself in small gestures. It is in listening without interrupting, in giving space when needed, in not forcing someone to feel what we feel. It is in saying, "I understand," instead of "you should." It is in remembering that love's power is in its gentleness, not in its demands. You might begin to notice that when you stop clinging, your relationships actually deepen. People feel more comfortable around you because they sense freedom, not pressure. Your presence becomes like a quiet garden, a place where others can rest and simply be. There is a saying in Zen, when you plant a tree, you do not pull its branches to make it grow faster. In the same way, we cannot force love to grow by holding tighter. We nurture it through patience, understanding, and trust. Love grows naturally in the space we give it. To practice this in the modern world requires courage. Society often tells us that love means possession, that jealousy is proof of passion, that attachment is loyalty. But the Dharma offers a different wisdom, that love is strongest when it is free. When we love without fear, we honor both ourselves and the one we love as living beings, not as objects of desire. If you wish, you can make this practice part of your weekly routine. Spend a few minutes each evening reflecting on your day. Ask yourself gently, did I love with freedom today? Did I offer safety, or did I cling? Write down your reflections without judgment. Even noticing a single moment of awareness is progress. Over time, you'll see that love becomes lighter, less anxious, more steady, more real. In this way, love transforms from a feeling into a spiritual path. Each moment of mindfulness becomes a step toward awakening. The more we practice awareness, the more we understand that love's true purpose is not to complete us, but to open us. It shows us our attachments so that we may release them. It reveals our fears so that we may transform them into compassion. When we love with presence, even silence becomes an expression of care. A simple glance, a gentle word, a shared breath, these become sacred. We no longer seek grand gestures because we have discovered the quiet miracle of being fully here, together. As night falls and the world softens into stillness, you might take one last breath and whisper inwardly, "May my love be safe, may it be gentle, may it be free." In that prayer, there is both letting go and returning home, for what we call love is, in truth, the natural state of a heart unafraid. And when we finally learn to love in this way, with openness, with wisdom, with the courage to release, we realize that the heart was never fragile. It was infinite all along. You are listening to a gentle teaching from the Moonlight Temple series, wisdom drawn from ancient Buddhist roots, brought to life with care and presence. To fully receive the heart of these teachings, I invite you now to pause, soften the edges of your day, let your body rest. Take in a slow, quiet breath and exhale into stillness. Allow your awareness to return, not to the past, not to the future, but to this very moment. Nothing else is required, just your presence. If this offering has brought you a moment of peace, we gently invite you to support this journey by subscribing to the Moonlight Temple, sharing these teachings, or simply returning again when your heart needs rest. Every small act of presence helps this temple of silence grow. Chapter 3: Marriage as a Mirror of Practice. Part 1: The Story, the Quarrels that Became Lessons. There was once a couple who loved each other deeply but could never seem to stop arguing. Their home was filled with small storms, not the kind that destroy, but the kind that never seemed to end. She would sigh at his forgetfulness. He would raise his voice over her endless reminders. The mornings began with irritation, the evenings ended in silence. Yet beneath their frustration, there remained a thread of care, fragile but unbroken. Neighbors often wondered why they stayed together. To the outside world, it seemed that love had turned into habit. But to those who looked more closely, something quieter was happening beneath the noise. Something like practice. One evening, after another argument over something trivial, the husband stormed outside, angry and tired. The sun was setting, painting the sky in a deep gold. He sat on the steps, breathing heavily, muttering to himself. After a while, he heard the sound of soft footsteps behind him. His wife stood there with 2 cups of tea. She didn't say a word. She simply sat down beside him, placed 1 cup next to his hand, and watched the sky. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then, after what felt like hours, she said softly, "Do you ever wonder why we keep fighting over the same things?" He let out a short laugh. "Because you never change," he said automatically. She smiled, not sarcastically, not bitterly, just gently. "Maybe," she whispered, "or maybe because we both keep missing the lesson." Her words hung in the air like the scent of rain. He turned to look at her and saw, perhaps for the first time, that her face was not angry. It was simply tired and kind. Something in him softened. He realized that behind all their quarrels was not hatred but misunderstanding. 2 people struggling to be heard, to be understood, to be seen. That night, after they returned inside, neither tried to prove a point. They spoke softly, as if testing a new language, one built not on blame, but on listening. It wasn't perfect. They still disagreed, but something had shifted. They had begun to see each other not as enemies, but as mirrors. The Buddha often spoke of relationships as fields of practice. Just as a farmer cultivates the soil to grow crops, the heart cultivates patience, compassion, and wisdom through daily interactions. This couple, without realizing it, had been practicing, not always skillfully, not always gently, but sincerely. Every conflict was a mirror reflecting their own attachments, their impatience, their pride. Every reconciliation was a small awakening. Over the months that followed, they began to notice how the same argument would appear again and again, sometimes in different forms, sometimes in the same words. But now, instead of trying to win, they started to ask, "What is this moment teaching me?" When he felt irritation rise, he began to see his own impatience. When she felt hurt, she learned to see her need for control. They started to laugh more easily, realizing that much of what they fought over was never truly important. What mattered was whether they could meet the moment with awareness. One day, the husband came across an old saying in a Buddhist text: "A husband and wife who live with understanding support each other in growing wisdom and virtue, and by doing so, they walk together toward awakening." He read it aloud to his wife. She smiled and said, "So that's what we've been doing all along, walking each other home, even if the road is bumpy." They both laughed, and for the first time, they felt that their marriage was not a burden to endure, but a temple of practice, one that required daily tending, not with perfection, but with mindfulness. The quarrels did not disappear. There were still moments of sharp words and long silences, but slowly, they learned to hold those moments differently. When one of them was angry, the other practiced silence. When one was impatient, the other breathed deeply before speaking. They began to see that every irritation was an invitation to return to presence. There was a time when they believed that peace meant never fighting again, but now they saw that peace meant knowing how to fight, without cruelty, without the need to win, without forgetting love. One evening, during another quiet sunset, the husband turned to his wife and said, "You know, I think I'm starting to understand why you used to nag me about small things. It wasn't because you wanted control. It was because you wanted connection. You wanted to be sure I was listening." She smiled. "And you were never really angry about the dishes," she replied. "You were angry because you felt unappreciated." He nodded. "Exactly." In that moment, they both laughed again, a laughter that was not about amusement, but recognition. They had begun to see through the surface of their emotions to the tenderness beneath. What they once called problems were now teachers. From that day forward, they began a small ritual. Each time tension rose, one of them would say softly, "Let's listen." It became their mantra. They would pause, breathe, and listen, not just to each other's words, but to the silence between them. In that silence, understanding often bloomed without effort. Sometimes, after these pauses, one of them would whisper, "Thank you for reminding me." The other would respond, "We're both still learning." Through these simple exchanges, they began to experience a deeper kind of love, one that was not about pleasure or perfection, but about presence. They discovered that patience was not weakness, and silence was not surrender. In fact, both were acts of strength, the strength to remain awake in the midst of emotion. One day, the wife asked their teacher, "How can we know if we are truly growing in wisdom through our relationship?" The teacher smiled and replied, "When your arguments make you softer instead of harder, when your pain makes you kinder instead of bitter, when your love makes you freer instead of possessive, that is when wisdom is growing." Those words stayed with them. From then on, every disagreement became an opportunity to check in with themselves. Were they becoming softer or harder, kinder or colder, freer or more afraid? Over the years, as they aged, their house grew quieter. They still teased each other, still disagreed sometimes, but their hearts were lighter. The mirror between them had become clear. They could see themselves in each other, not the parts they wanted to fix, but the shared humanity they had both learned to accept. They realized that a relationship, like a spiritual path, is never finished. There is no final perfection, only deeper understanding. And this understanding comes not from escaping discomfort, but from meeting it fully, together. In the end, they saw that marriage was never meant to be a fairy tale. It was a mirror, one that reveals every shadow, every light, every illusion of the ego. But if met with awareness, that mirror does not wound, it awakens. It shows us what we could never see alone. On their anniversary, They sat again by the same window where they had once shared tea after a storm. The husband looked out and said quietly, "We used to fight to prove who was right. Now we practice to remember who we are." His wife reached for his hand and whispered, "And that's enough." Outside, the evening light softened, and everything was still. The story of this couple is not one of perfection or endless harmony. It is the story of ordinary love becoming sacred through mindfulness. They learned that being together is not about avoiding conflict, but using it as a tool for awakening, learning to see, to listen, and to forgive again and again. When two people practice like this, their relationship becomes a path, one where wisdom and compassion grow side by side, and where every quarrel becomes a gentle bell, calling them back to awareness. And perhaps that is the quiet beauty of marriage. Not two people completing each other, but two souls polishing each other's hearts until they shine with understanding. Part 2. The teaching, growing wisdom and virtue together. In the gentle light of the Dharma, a marriage is not only a companionship of two people, it is a shared path of awakening. Two individuals come together not merely to satisfy desire or fill loneliness, but to become mirrors for one another's growth. Each partner reflects the other's joys, fears, and blind spots, helping both to see more clearly. When this reflection is met with mindfulness instead of blame, love becomes the most profound practice of all. The Buddha once said that happiness in a relationship is not found through the absence of difficulty, but through the harmony of two hearts growing in both wisdom and virtue. Wisdom sees clearly, virtue lives kindly. When these two mature side by side, a bond transforms into a refuge. In the language of the Dharma, wisdom prajna is the ability to see things as they are, to perceive the arising and fading of emotions without being swept away. Virtue, shila, is the steady discipline of acting with integrity, compassion, and patience. Together, they are like two wings of the same bird. One without the other cannot take flight. In daily life, however, it is easy to forget this balance. Most relationships tilt too far toward emotion or intellect, too much heart without clarity, or too much clarity without warmth. But in the practice of mindful love, both are needed. A wise love feels deeply but does not drown. It observes tenderly but does not cling. When a couple argues, they are not enemies in conflict. They are students in the same classroom, facing the same lesson from different sides. The argument itself is not the problem. The real issue is whether the lesson is seen. Anger, jealousy, irritation. These emotions are not signs of failure. They are signals that a misunderstanding is waiting to be understood. To grow in wisdom means to see emotions without fusing with them. It means being able to say inwardly, "This is anger arising in me," instead of, "I am angry." The difference seems small, but it changes everything. When we identify with anger, it owns us. When we simply observe it, we can hold it gently and learn from it. The Buddha taught that awareness is like a calm lake. When disturbed by wind, waves form, but the water itself remains clear. Emotions are like those waves. They rise and fall. If we mistake the waves for the entire lake, we lose sight of its stillness. But when we remain present, we begin to see that emotions are not permanent. They are movements of the mind, not its essence. This understanding is especially powerful in relationships. When two people live closely together, their emotions often mirror one another. One's frustration ignites the other's defensiveness. One's silence triggers the other's fear. Without awareness, this becomes a cycle of reactivity. But when just one person pauses, breathes, observes, the entire energy shifts. A wise relationship does not seek to avoid these moments. It learns to navigate them consciously. Imagine two strings of an instrument. When one vibrates, the other resonates. But if one string is tuned to stillness, it brings harmony instead of noise. The same is true for love. One calm mind can restore balance to both hearts. To practice this, couples must learn the art of seeing, but not fusing. When your partner is upset, you can acknowledge their emotion without absorbing it. When you are upset, you can witness your reaction without projecting it. It is not easy, but this is the heart of mindfulness. It is how awareness transforms daily tension into the soil of understanding. In the teachings of the Buddha, happiness is not defined as comfort or the absence of conflict. True happiness arises from understanding. When understanding grows, even difficult moments become sacred. You begin to see that your partner is not there to please you, but to reveal you, to help you discover the patterns that keep you trapped in suffering. Through this realization, love becomes less about changing the other and more about transforming oneself. You stop asking, "Why are they like this?" and begin to ask, "What is this moment teaching me about patience, humility, or compassion?" In this way, every disagreement becomes an invitation to deepen wisdom. The Buddha compared human relationships to two pieces of wood rubbing against each other. At first, the friction creates heat, discomfort, even pain. But over time, if both are handled with care, that same friction can ignite a fire, the fire of awareness, the warmth of understanding. In the same way, the daily friction of marriage, the little misunderstandings, the unmet expectations, can either burn the heart or awaken it. What makes the difference is how you hold it. Do you react with judgment or respond with curiosity? Do you fight to be right or pause to see clearly? Virtue plays a crucial role here. Virtue is not moral rigidity. It is the commitment to cause no harm, to act with kindness, even when emotions are strong. It is the courage to speak gently when anger tempts you to shout. It is the honesty to say, "I'm sorry," even when pride whispers otherwise. Virtue is the expression of wisdom through behavior. Without it, wisdom remains abstract. With it, wisdom becomes embodied. When wisdom and virtue grow together, love becomes balanced. You no longer depend on external circumstances for peace. You realize that harmony is something you create moment by moment through mindfulness and compassion. Even when storms arise, you can return to calm because you understand that storms are temporary. The Buddha's teaching on the middle way applies beautifully here. A healthy relationship is not built on indulgence or suppression, dominance or submission, passion or detachment. It lives in the middle, where love breathes freely, where both people grow without imprisoning each other. One of the deepest insights of Buddhist practice is that we do not own our emotions, nor do we own another person's. Each feeling, each reaction, arises from causes and conditions, past experiences, fears, and expectations. When we see this clearly, we stop taking everything personally. The words your partner speaks in anger are often not about you. They are echoes of their own pain. And when you speak in frustration, it is often your own wound trying to be seen. To understand this is to soften. Compassion becomes the natural response. You begin to listen more deeply, not to defend yourself, but to truly hear what is behind the words. Often, beneath anger lies fear, beneath criticism lies longing. When we learn to see that, love transforms from a battlefield into a sanctuary. A wise couple understands that love is not a constant state of bliss. It is a practice, a daily turning toward presence. It requires humility, patience, and forgiveness, not just once, but again and again. Each day offers a new chance to begin again, to polish the mirror of the heart a little more. When both partners walk this path, the relationship becomes a shared practice ground. Each supports the other's growth, sometimes through warmth, sometimes through challenge. The goal is not to avoid pain, but to use pain as the teacher that refines love into compassion. In a famous parable, the Buddha told of a monk who complained that another monk irritated him constantly. The Buddha said, "Good, that monk is your teacher in patience." In the same way, our partners often become our teachers, revealing where we are still reactive, still proud, still unawake. When we recognize this, we can bow inwardly and whisper, "Thank you for showing me where I can grow." In this understanding, marriage ceases to be a contract and becomes a path. You walk side by side, not as perfect beings, but as fellow travelers. You fall, you get up, you laugh, you forgive, you continue. Each mistake becomes a lesson. Each act of forgiveness becomes a blessing. And slowly, without even realizing it, both hearts begin to mirror the qualities of the awakened mind: patience, clarity, joy, and peace. These are not dramatic transformations. They unfold quietly, like dawn spreading over a field. When you see your partner through the eyes of wisdom, you no longer see only their flaws. You see their suffering, their beauty, their humanity. You understand that, like you, they are learning how to love. And that understanding, simple, tender, forgiving, is enlightenment in daily life. At the end of the day, as you sit together in silence, perhaps holding hands or simply breathing in the same space, you might realize that the purpose of being together was never to escape suffering, but to understand it together, to let it soften the heart and illuminate the path home. And in that quiet realization, the noise of the world fades. What remains is peace, the peace of two hearts learning, moment by moment, to see with clarity and to love with wisdom. Part 3. Reflection and practice, the 4-minute covenant. In every relationship, there comes a time when words have been said too often, and yet not deeply enough. We speak quickly, listen halfway, and forget that communication is not about exchanging thoughts, it is about it touching the heart. In the teachings of mindfulness, a true conversation is an act of compassion. It is not just about solving problems, it is about remembering our shared humanity. In modern life, couples often rush through days filled with noise, emails, chores, routines, screens. By the time evening comes, both are too tired to truly connect. But just as the body needs nourishment, the heart needs small moments of genuine presence. Without them, love fades into habit. The Buddha often reminded his followers that awareness grows not in long retreats, but in consistent daily practice. And so, in the spirit of mindful living, we can begin again, not with grand promises, but with something simple, something practical, the 4-minute covenant. This is not a rule or ritual. It is a gentle agreement between two hearts, to pause once a day for just 4 minutes and come back to awareness together. 4 minutes may seem small, but presence does not measure time, it measures depth. In these few moments, two people can restore what endless conversations sometimes fail to heal. The 4-minute covenant consists of 4 elements: 1 listening, 1 gratitude, 1 apology, and 1 promise. Each is a doorway back to understanding, to softness, to the quiet harmony that lies beneath all noise. The first minute is for listening. One person speaks, the other listens, not to reply, not to correct, but simply to hear. True listening is rare because it requires the listener to set aside their identity and become open space. In that openness, understanding blooms naturally. The Buddha once said, if you truly listen to another with a quiet mind, their suffering will begin to dissolve. Listening is not a technique, it is love made audible. During this minute, the speaker can share one small truth, something that feels real in the moment, a joy, a worry, a need. It does not have to be profound. What matters is sincerity. The listener, meanwhile, practices awareness, breathing, softening, letting each word arrive like a wave touching the shore. No interruption, no advice, only presence. The second minute is for gratitude. After listening, each partner takes a breath and speaks one thing they are thankful for, not about possessions or achievements, but about each other. Gratitude transforms perception. It shifts attention from what is missing to what is already here. Even a single acknowledgement, thank you for making dinner, thank you for your patience, thank you for still being here, can soften a hardened heart. The Buddha taught that gratitude is one of the highest forms of happiness because it turns every ordinary day into a miracle. When we see the goodness in another, we strengthen the goodness within ourselves. Gratitude, expressed daily, becomes the soil in which trust grows. The third minute is for apology, not the kind that is burdened with guilt or self-blame, but the apology that arises from humility, the recognition that our words and actions sometimes cause pain, even without intention. The act of saying, "I'm sorry," is not about lowering oneself. It is about freeing both people from the weight of unspoken resentment. In Buddhist teachings, this is called reconciliation through mindfulness. It is the practice of returning to peace by acknowledging imperfection. Every relationship, like every human heart, carries small wounds. Some heal on their own, but others need gentle tending. When we apologize sincerely, we water the seed of trust. When we receive apology with grace, we nourish the seed of forgiveness. The final minute is for promise, a small, conscious intention for tomorrow. It may be as simple as, "I'll try to listen more carefully," or "I'll take a walk with you after dinner," or even, "Let's keep being patient with each other." This minute is about renewal, reminding both hearts that love is not a fixed state, but a living practice. Each day offers another chance to begin again. 4 minutes, one listening, one gratitude, one apology, one promise. That is all. Yet if practiced daily, it becomes a quiet revolution, a way of transforming habit into mindfulness, tension into tenderness. Over time, these small moments weave a deeper connection. The couple begins to notice subtle shifts, fewer harsh words, more gentle silences. They argue less not because they have solved everything, but because they have learned to pause. They discover that listening is not losing, that gratitude is not weakness, that apology is not defeat. They learn that love, when practiced mindfully, becomes a source of strength. Sometimes one of them forgets and the other reminds. Shall we do our 4 minutes? It might happen before bed, or over morning tea, or even in the car before work. The place does not matter, the energy does. When they pause together, even briefly, they return to what the Buddha called right mindfulness, awareness anchored in kindness. In Buddhist psychology, There is a concept called interbeing, the recognition that we do not exist alone. Just as a flower needs sunlight, water, and soil to bloom, we need understanding, appreciation, and patience to thrive. The 4-minute covenant nourishes these conditions daily. It reminds us that love is not a feeling to be preserved, but a relationship to be practiced, moment by moment, breath by breath. When a couple practices this consistently, they begin to experience a shift in perception. They no longer see each other through the lens of expectation, but through the eyes of awareness. They begin to sense the subtle energies of each other's moods, the fatigue after a long day, the silent longing for connection, the quiet joy of being seen. In that awareness, empathy replaces irritation. The Buddha compared mindfulness to a lamp that dispels darkness. In relationships, that lamp is shared between two hearts. When one holds it with care, both are illuminated. This is why daily practice matters, not for perfection, but for continuity. Every small act of awareness adds a drop of clarity to the pool of understanding. Over time, that pool becomes deep enough to hold even the storms of life. Of course, not every day will feel harmonious. There will be evenings when one is too tired, mornings when silence feels heavy, moments when hurt words still escape. But mindfulness is not about never falling. It is about returning, gently, again and again. Even a single breath of awareness can reconnect two hearts that feel far apart. In this sense, love and spiritual practice are the same journey. Both require patience, humility, and courage. Both invite us to look inward instead of outward, to listen instead of react, to soften instead of defend. Every couple, no matter how different, can begin this practice. It does not require belief or perfection, only willingness. When you begin, it may feel awkward. The mind might say, "This is too simple to matter," but simplicity is the heart of truth. 4 minutes of genuine presence can do more for a relationship than 4 hours of argument. The power lies in the quality of attention. Attention is love in motion. When you listen deeply, you are telling your partner, "You matter, I see you, I am here." That message, unspoken but deeply felt, is healing. It touches the part of every human heart that longs to be seen without judgment. As this practice deepens, something subtle begins to happen. You start carrying that awareness beyond the 4 minutes, into conversations, into daily routines, even into moments of silence. The boundaries between practice and life dissolve. You find yourself pausing before reacting, thanking more often, apologizing more easily, promising more gently. The covenant expands from minutes into a way of being, and perhaps, in the quiet glow of one evening, as you sit side by side, you will realize that these small acts of mindfulness have built something sacred, not a perfect love, but a peaceful one. A love where both hearts can rest, grow, and continue to awaken together. In the end, this is what the Buddha meant when he said that happiness is born of understanding and love. When we learn to listen with awareness, to speak with gratitude, to apologize with humility, and to promise with sincerity, we bring the Dharma into our daily lives. We make the ordinary extraordinary. So tonight, or any night, take 4 minutes, just 4. Listen, thank, apologize, promise, not because love is fragile, but because it is precious, and like every living thing, it blossoms through care. You are listening to a gentle teaching from the Moonlight Temple series, wisdom drawn from ancient Buddhist roots, brought to life with care and presence. To fully receive the heart of these teachings, I invite you now to pause. Soften the edges of your day. Let your body rest. Take in a slow, quiet breath and exhale into stillness. Allow your awareness to return, not to the past, not to the future, but to this very moment. Nothing else is required, just your presence. If this offering has brought you a moment of peace, we gently invite you to support this journey by subscribing to the Moonlight Temple, sharing these teachings, or simply returning again when your heart needs rest. Every small act of presence helps this temple of silence grow. Chapter 4. The Law Between Two Hearts. Part 1. The Story, the Debt of Love and the Weight of Karma. There once lived a couple who seemed inseparable to everyone who knew them. They had the kind of connection that looked effortless, the way they finished each other's sentences, the quiet glances they shared across a crowded room, the way one hand would always find the other in silence. People often said they were meant to be, as if destiny itself had written their names side by side. But beneath that harmony was something else, a quiet undercurrent of suffering. They loved each other deeply, yet somehow they kept hurting each other without meaning to. One moment they were tender, the next they were cold. The same conversation would turn into an argument again and again, even when they tried to avoid it. They wondered why two people who loved so much could still cause so much pain. Their story began years earlier, in the same small town where they had both grown up. When they first met, it felt like recognition, as if they had known each other for lifetimes. Their bond was immediate and intense, filled with passion and familiarity. But as time passed, that intensity became a double-edged sword. The closeness that had once been comforting now felt suffocating. What began as love turned into a strange cycle of dependence, expectation, and disappointment. One day, after a long argument, the woman sat alone by the window, watching the rain fall. Her mind was tired from the endless tug-of-war between love and resentment. "Why do we keep doing this to each other?" she whispered. It wasn't anger she felt. It was exhaustion, as though they were both trapped in a story they couldn't rewrite. A few days later, an old friend visited her, a monk who had once been her childhood teacher. Seeing her sadness, he poured her a cup of tea and asked gently, "Tell me, what do you expect from him?" She thought for a long time before answering. "I just want peace," she said. The monk smiled softly. "Peace is not something another can give you," he said. "Peace comes when you understand the law between two hearts." "The law between two hearts," she repeated. "Yes," the monk said. "The law of cause and effect, karma. We often speak of karma as punishment or reward, but it is neither. Karma is relationship. It is the echo of our past actions, thoughts, and intentions, meeting us again in the form of people and situations. You and your husband are not together by accident. You are repaying old debts, both of kindness and of pain. You are learning to balance the scales of the heart." She frowned slightly. "But why does it hurt so much?" "Because you are still trying to settle old accounts," the monk said. "In past lives, perhaps one gave more than the other. One hurt and one forgave. One left and one waited. Now, you meet again to continue the lesson, to learn how to love without debt." His words settled into her mind like rain sinking into dry earth. She began to see her relationship in a new light, not as a mistake, but as a mirror. Every moment of tension, every word that hurt, every tear that fell was not random. It was the unfolding of an unfinished story, the opportunity to rewrite it with compassion. That evening, She told her husband what the monk had said. At first, he laughed softly, thinking it was just another way of saying fate. But as she spoke, he noticed something different in her tone. It wasn't blame or self-pity. It was calm understanding. "So you're saying this is karma?" he asked. She nodded. "Maybe we've been trading the same pain back and forth for a long time. Maybe it's time to end the cycle." He didn't know what to say. But that night, as they sat together, something shifted in the space between them. They stopped speaking from habit. They started listening again, not to defend, but to understand. Over time, they began to notice patterns in their behavior, the same triggers, the same reactions. He saw how quickly he became defensive when she questioned him. She saw how her silence often came from fear, not wisdom. Each time they caught themselves, they would pause, breathe, and ask silently, "What is this moment teaching me?" The more they practiced, the more they realized that love was not about who was right or wrong. It was about awareness, about seeing how their actions shaped each other's hearts. Each word was a seed. Each silence, too, carried a consequence. There was one evening, many months later, when the husband came home after a long day, frustrated and tired. She had been waiting for him with dinner, but he barely looked at her. The air was heavy with unspoken irritation. In the past, this would have turned into another argument, but this time, she remembered the monk's words. She took a deep breath and quietly asked, "Are you okay?" He sighed, the anger softening just a little. "I don't know," he admitted. "I just feel like I can't do anything right lately." She didn't try to fix it. She just nodded and said, "That must feel hard." Something opened between them, a tenderness that neither had felt in a long time. It wasn't grand or dramatic. It was quiet and human. He looked at her, and for the first time, he saw not an opponent, but another soul, struggling just like him. That night, as they sat side by side in silence, he said softly, "Maybe this is how we repay old debts, by learning to be kind even when we don't feel like it." She smiled. Maybe kindness is the only currency that clears them. From then on, their relationship changed, not because life became easier, but because they began to live with awareness. They started to see each argument as a mirror reflecting an inner habit. They began to understand that every action, a harsh word, a gentle gesture, a patient silence, created ripples in the shared field of their lives. In this way, they transformed karma into practice. Instead of seeing suffering as punishment, they began to see it as instruction, as life's way of guiding them toward wisdom. When pain arose, they didn't rush to blame. They paused to see what old story was being rewritten. Sometimes they would laugh at how familiar their reactions were. "There we go again," she would say, smiling. "The same pattern." And he would reply, "At least now we see it." Their love, once filled with expectation, became lighter. It wasn't perfect, no love ever is, but it became more real. They discovered that being, meant to be, did not mean never hurting each other. It meant staying long enough to learn from the hurt. The monk visited them again years later. He found them sitting on the porch, sharing tea. When he asked how they were, the husband said, "We're still paying our debts, but with interest, in laughter." The monk smiled. "Then your account is nearly balanced." The couple laughed softly. They knew what he meant, that karma is not a punishment, but a teacher. Each act of kindness, patience, or forgiveness dissolves old pain. Every moment of awareness transforms destiny into choice. In the end, They realize that love is not about escaping karma, but fulfilling it with gentleness, with clarity, with grace. When we understand this, every relationship becomes sacred, because every connection is an opportunity to heal. And perhaps that is the quiet miracle of life between two hearts, that we are not simply here to love each other, but to awaken each other again and again, until there is no more debt left to pay, only peace. Part 2. The teaching, karma as habit, relationship as opportunity. The Buddha taught that karma is not a mysterious force that punishes or rewards us. It is much simpler and far more intimate than that. Karma means action, the energy of body, speech, and mind that we create every moment. Every thought, word, and gesture leaves an imprint on consciousness, shaping the way we experience the world and the people in it. Karma is not something that happens to us. It is something that happens through us, in every interaction, in every choice. In relationships, karma often appears as patterns, the ways we think, react, and interpret the behavior of others. These patterns can be subtle or strong, hidden or obvious. When two people come together, their karmic tendencies meet like two rivers merging. The currents can flow harmoniously, or they can clash and stir up old sediment. Either way, the meeting is never random. It is an opportunity for both to see themselves more clearly. To understand this, imagine two people arguing. One feels unheard and becomes defensive. The other feels disrespected and withdraws. Each reaction strengthens the other's pain. This cycle repeats, not because they wish to suffer, but because their karmic habits, their conditioned ways of seeing and responding, keep recreating the same scene. The external situation changes, but the inner story remains the same. Karma, in this sense, is not fate. It is repetition without awareness. The Buddha said that the wheel of samsara, the endless cycle of suffering, turns not because of outer circumstances, but because of the habits of the mind. When we act out of anger, fear, or desire, we reinforce those emotions. When we act with mindfulness, patience, and compassion, we weaken the old chains and begin to write a new story. In relationships, this understanding can transform everything. Instead of blaming the other person for our unhappiness, we begin to see how our own perceptions create the world we experience. The person we love most often becomes the clearest mirror of our karma, reflecting back our unhealed emotions, our attachments, our expectations. What we see in them, especially what irritates or hurts us, is often what remains unresolved within ourselves. This is why even couples who seem meant to be can still suffer deeply together. Their connection is not a sign of perfection, but of unfinished business. They have met not only to enjoy love, but to purify it, to transform attachment into compassion, ignorance into wisdom. This process can be painful because it requires honesty, but it is also sacred because it offers liberation. When the Buddha was asked about karma between people, he explained that our relationships are woven from three kinds of seeds: gratitude, resentment, and neutrality. When gratitude ripens, we feel drawn to someone with affection and ease. When resentment ripens, we may feel attraction, mixed with conflict, as if compelled to face an old wound. And when neutral seeds ripen, we meet others casually, without much intensity. Every connection has its purpose. Those who bring us joy remind us of kindness we once gave. Those who challenge us return as teachers, offering chances to grow. Understanding this helps soften the heart. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" we begin to ask, "What is this teaching me?" The question shifts us from resistance to curiosity, from victimhood to awareness. Each moment of discomfort becomes a doorway to self-knowledge. Karma also teaches us about the power of intention. It is not only what we do, but why we do it that shapes our future. A word spoken in anger leaves a different imprint than the same word spoken in love. A gesture born of fear creates confusion. One born of compassion brings clarity. This is why mindfulness is so essential. It brings consciousness into action. It allows us to choose wisely instead of reacting blindly. In daily life, karma manifests through 3 channels: body, speech, and mind. These are the tools through which we create harmony or discord. Through the body, karma appears in our physical actions, how we touch, how we move, how we respond when anger arises. A harsh gesture can wound as deeply as a harsh word. A gentle hand can soothe pain without needing to speak. Through speech, karma flows in the words we use. Speech can heal or harm, unite or divide. The Buddha often described right speech as speech that is truthful, gentle, and timely. In relationships, right speech means speaking from kindness rather than ego. It means waiting until both hearts are ready to listen. It means choosing silence over words that may bruise. Through the mind, karma takes root in thoughts, the subtle seeds that eventually bloom into words and actions. The mind's stories about others, you always ignore me, you never understand, you don't care, become self-fulfilling. The Buddha taught that mind precedes all experience. With our thoughts, we make the world. When we change the way we think, the world and our relationships begin to change. Understanding this does not mean suppressing emotion. It means seeing emotion clearly without letting it control us. Anger is not wrong. It is energy distorted by misunderstanding. Jealousy is not evil. It is love shadowed by fear. Every emotion contains wisdom when met with awareness. To see this is to begin the process of liberation. In this light, even pain becomes sacred. It is the echo of past actions inviting us to respond differently. If someone criticizes us unfairly, we can react with defensiveness, repeating the old karma, or we can listen calmly, breaking the cycle. The moment we pause, even for a few breaths, we interrupt the chain of reactivity that keeps suffering alive. This pause is where transformation happens. The Buddha called it the gap between stimulus and response, the space in which freedom resides. Within that small space, we can choose to speak or stay silent, to react or reflect, to harm or to heal. The more we practice pausing, the more our karma shifts from unconscious habit to conscious intention. Over time, this practice changes the quality of love itself. We stop loving others as extensions of our desires and begin to love them as beings walking their own path. We recognize that we cannot control another's karma, only our own. We can offer kindness, honesty, patience, but we cannot dictate how the other will respond. And that realization, instead of creating distance, brings peace. In the Buddha's teachings, understanding karma is inseparable from compassion. Once we see that every being is acting from their conditioning, we stop taking things so personally. The harsh word from a loved one is seen as their suffering speaking through them. The cold silence after an argument is not rejection but confusion. When we view others through this lens, judgment dissolves. Compassion becomes natural. There is a beautiful story from the Buddhist tradition of 2 monks who had both been insulted by the same man. One monk fumed for days, unable to let go. The other simply smiled and continued walking. The angry monk asked, "How can you remain so calm after what he said?" The wise monk replied, "Because I did not accept the gift he offered." That is karma in action, the freedom to choose whether or not to carry another's pain. In relationships, this freedom is everything. We may not always be able to stop conflict from arising, but we can choose not to feed it. Each time we refrain from reacting, each time we respond with mindfulness, we weaken the karmic bond of suffering and strengthen the bond of understanding. The Buddha described this process as purifying the mind. It does not happen through belief or ritual, but through awareness in daily life. Every small act of patience, every gentle word, every moment of humility purifies old habits. This is how we turn karma into compassion, not by escaping life, but by living it consciously. Ultimately, karma between two people is not about punishment or destiny. It is about awakening. When we meet someone who challenges us deeply, we are being invited to grow. When we meet someone who loves us unconditionally, we are being reminded of what we are capable of. Every relationship is both a repayment and a gift. The path of wisdom, then, is not to avoid relationships but to use them as practice. The more we observe, the more we learn that nothing another person does can truly harm our essence. Only our reactions can. When we understand this, we begin to live with freedom. And so, the next time you find yourself hurt, angry, or misunderstood, pause and breathe. Ask quietly, what is this karma showing me? What habit is ready to end? Each answer will bring you closer to peace. For karma, when seen clearly, is no longer a burden. It is a teacher, patient, precise, and perfectly compassionate. It never seeks to punish, only to awaken. And when we finally learn its lessons, what remains between two hearts is no longer debt, but grace. Part 3. Reflection and practice. The kindness, ledger, and the 10-second pause. There is a quiet truth that unfolds when we begin to see relationships through the lens of karma. Every moment with another person is both a continuation and a new beginning. We inherit patterns of behavior, ways of reacting, of speaking, of defending ourselves. Yet within each interaction lies the chance to plant new seeds. The Buddha often described this as the meeting of two fields of karma. Each of us brings our own soil, rich with past experiences, both painful and kind. The question is, what will we choose to plant today? This awareness transforms how we approach love, conflict, and even the smallest gestures. Instead of thinking in terms of blame, we start to see in terms of consequence. Every word, every glance, every silence becomes a thread in the fabric we are weaving together. When we realize this, we naturally wish to create goodness, to water the seeds of patience, generosity, and warmth that will one day bear the fruit of peace. But intention alone is not enough. The mind, by habit, slips easily into reaction. It takes practice to turn awareness into action. That is why the teachings often return to the simplicity of daily effort. Small, steady steps that transform karma, not through dramatic change, but through consistent kindness. One of these simple practices is what I call the kindness ledger. It is not a ledger in the worldly sense, but a gentle mindfulness exercise that keeps the heart awake to goodness. Each day, you take a few moments, perhaps in the morning or before sleep, to write down one kind act you have done for your partner or loved one that day. Just one. It could be something as small as offering a cup of tea, a smile, a word of encouragement, or even the choice to remain silent when anger rises. The act itself may seem ordinary, but the awareness behind it changes everything. Writing it down plants a conscious reminder. I am creating good karma right here, with this person, in this moment. The ledger becomes a mirror for the mind, showing how often kindness appears and how easily we forget it when irritation clouds our vision. The Buddha once said, "A drop of water, falling again and again, fills the jar." In the same way, small acts of goodness, performed steadily, fill the heart with warmth. Over time, these acts accumulate, forming a new pattern that replaces old habits of resentment or impatience. When couples practice this, they begin to notice subtle shifts. The focus moves from what the other did wrong to what I can do right now to nurture harmony. This shift of attention is itself liberation. It frees the mind from the endless loop of blame and places it gently in the field of responsibility and love. The kindness ledger is not meant to be a performance or a scorecard. It is not about counting deeds or expecting appreciation. It is about remembering that love is not a feeling we wait to receive, but a practice we choose to live. Each entry, however small, becomes an offering to the shared karma of two hearts walking the same path. Some couples even choose to share their ledgers once a week. They read them aloud, not as a list of achievements, but as a way of saying, "I see you, I am trying." In those moments, the wall of misunderstanding softens. Gratitude begins to flow naturally, and even old wounds start to lose their weight. However, kindness requires mindfulness. Without mindfulness, our best intentions can quickly dissolve under the heat of emotion. That is why the Buddha also taught the practice of pausing, creating space between impulse and action. The 10-second pause is a powerful yet simple meditation to cultivate this space. When irritation arises, when your partner says something that sparks defensiveness or disappointment, stop for just 10 seconds before reacting. Breathe slowly. Feel the air move in and out of your body. Count quietly, not to suppress emotion, but to give it room to be seen. In those 10 seconds, awareness steps in. You begin to notice the energy in your chest, the tightening in your stomach, the rush of thoughts wanting to defend or attack. You realize that this surge of emotion is not permanent. It is only a wave passing through the ocean of the mind. If you act while the wave is high, you will speak from turbulence. But if you wait just 10 seconds, the wave settles and your words can come from clarity. This is not a technique for control. It is a practice of compassion. The pause is not meant to suppress truth, but to deliver it with wisdom. In those moments, we see that anger is often a cry for understanding. Impatience is often a symptom of exhaustion. By waiting, by breathing, we let compassion catch up to emotion. Over time, this practice becomes second nature. You may find that conflicts that once spiraled into hours of hurt now dissolve before they begin. The energy that was once spent defending the ego is now used for listening, for understanding. You begin to realize that every pause is a doorway, a small but sacred entry into freedom. In Buddhist psychology, this awareness is called right effort. It is the deliberate choice to cultivate wholesome states of mind and to abandon unwholesome ones. It does not demand perfection. It asks for sincerity. Each time you pause, you interrupt the momentum of old karma. Each time you act with kindness, you plant new seeds. Slowly, the soil of the relationship changes, softer, more fertile, capable of supporting deeper love. There is a story in the Buddhist texts about a disciple who asked the Buddha how long it takes to purify one's karma. The Buddha smiled and said, "As long as it takes for one drop of ink to clear a pot of water, If you keep pouring in clean water, one day it will be pure. In the same way, each kind act, each mindful pause, is a drop of clean water in the vessel of your shared life. Sometimes, people misunderstand karma as something heavy, something unchangeable. But the Buddha's teaching is clear. Karma is not a chain, it is clay. We are shaping it every moment through intention. Even a lifetime of harshness can begin to soften the instant awareness touches it. When you practice kindness consciously, you begin to feel its immediate effect. The mind relaxes, the heart expands. You no longer wait for your partner to change to feel peace. Peace becomes something you can create. This is the quiet power of karma, that transformation always begins within. The 10-second pause complements the kindness ledger beautifully. One is the seed, the other is the soil. The ledger nurtures awareness of goodness. The pause protects it. Together, they become a rhythm, the giving and receiving of mindful love. Some evenings, as you write in your ledger, you may recall a moment when you almost spoke in anger but paused instead. Write that down too. It may not look like an act of love, but it is one of the greatest. Restraint born from compassion is one of the most profound expressions of care. In time, these small daily practices weave something sacred between two people, a living field of presence. You begin to sense karma not as something external, but as the invisible fabric of your connection. Every smile, every breath, every pause becomes part of the great unfolding of understanding. Even when mistakes happen, as they inevitably will, awareness turns them into teachers. You no longer judge yourself harshly. You recognize that every stumble is another opportunity to see more clearly, to begin again. This attitude of patience is what keeps love alive, not the absence of conflict, but the willingness to keep learning together. In the stillness that follows a pause, in the warmth that follows a kind gesture, something timeless begins to shine through. You realize that you and your partner are not just two individuals bound by circumstance, but two travelers walking a shared path of awakening. The obstacles that once seemed heavy now feel like stepping stones. The Buddha said, "If you wish to know the past, look at your present. If you wish to know the future, look at your present actions." These words remind us that karma is being written now, not yesterday, not tomorrow. Every moment is a pen in the hand of awareness. So tonight, as you close your eyes, take a breath and ask yourself gently, what seed will I plant tomorrow? Perhaps it will be a kind word, a moment of listening, or a 10-second pause before speaking. Whatever it is, let it come from love. Because love, when practiced with mindfulness, is not bound by karma, it transforms it. And in this transformation, the space between two hearts becomes a garden, quiet, alive, endlessly growing. You are listening to a gentle teaching from the Moonlight Temple series. Wisdom drawn from ancient Buddhist roots, brought to life with care and presence. To fully receive the heart of these teachings, I invite you now to pause. Soften the edges of your day. Let your body rest. Take in a slow, quiet breath and exhale into stillness. Allow your awareness to return, not to the past, not to the future, but to this very moment. Nothing else is required, just your presence. If this offering has brought you a moment of peace, we gently invite you to support this journey by subscribing to the Moonlight Temple, sharing these teachings, or simply returning again when your heart needs rest. Every small act of presence helps this temple of silence grow. Chapter 5. living truthfully, seeing oneself clearly. Part 1. The story, the monk who lived a role until he found his true self. Once, in a quiet monastery nestled among mountains, there lived a young monk who had become well known for his calmness. The visitors who came to the temple often praised him. "He is so serene," they would whisper. "His presence feels like still water." The older monk smiled proudly whenever his name was mentioned. He never raised his voice, never seemed impatient, always bowed at the right moments, always smiled gently. But inside, he was exhausted. Each day, he tried harder to be the monk that everyone expected him to be. When he swept the courtyard, he moved gracefully, aware of the eyes watching him. When he gave talks to lay people, he chose his words carefully to sound wise. He was kind and polite, yet behind his smile there was tension, a quiet fear of being seen as anything less than perfect. At night, when the monastery grew silent, he would sit by the small lamp in his room and feel a strange emptiness. "Why am I pretending?" he wondered. "I follow every rule, I speak gently, I meditate every day, yet my heart feels hollow." One evening, an older monk, his teacher, noticed the fatigue behind his practiced calm. He came into the young monk's room, sat quietly, and said, "You have been wearing your robe beautifully, but it seems it has become too heavy for you." The young monk looked down, embarrassed. "I'm trying my best," he said softly. The old monk nodded. "That is the problem," he replied. "You are trying to be calm instead of seeing the one who wants to appear calm." The young monk frowned, unsure what he meant. The teacher continued, "You have become an actor playing the role of a peaceful monk. But peace cannot be performed. It must be lived, and to live it, you must first dare to be true. True to your confusion, your irritation, your pride, your longing. If you hide from your own heart, how can you hope to understand the hearts of others?" The young monk was silent. The words felt sharp yet kind, like light breaking through fog. That night, for the first time in years, he let himself feel everything he had been hiding. He sat in meditation, and instead of pushing away his restlessness, he watched it. He saw the irritation that arose when others didn't listen to him, the pride that came when he was praised, the sadness that lingered beneath his discipline. He watched each feeling rise and fall like waves. At first, it frightened him. He had believed that being a monk meant transcending all this, being beyond anger, beyond pride, beyond desire. But now, he saw that truth was not about suppressing what is human. It was about seeing it clearly, without being owned by it. In the following days, he stopped trying to appear calm. When he was tired, he rested. When he was sad, he sat quietly with that sadness. When others asked him questions he couldn't answer, he admitted honestly, "I don't know." To his surprise, the world didn't collapse. The older monks respected him even more, and the younger ones began to feel safe around him, sensing his sincerity. One morning, while working in the garden, a visiting novice asked him, "How can I stop feeling angry?" The young monk smiled, remembering his teacher's words. "Don't stop it," he said gently. "See it, name it, breathe with it. Anger grows when you pretend it isn't there, but when you see it with kindness, it loses its power." That was the moment he realized what it meant to live truthfully. It wasn't about showing only the good parts of the self, but about being present with the whole self, the calm and the restless, the kind and the fearful. Years passed, and he became a teacher himself. But he never forgot the lesson that had changed his life, that wearing peace like a mask is not the same as embodying peace through awareness. When people came to him for advice, he never pretended to be above them. If someone wept, he wept with them. If someone was angry, he listened without judgment. He often said, "The practice of truth begins when you stop performing." One day, an old friend from the city visited the monastery. Seeing the monk's simple life, the friend asked, "Don't you ever feel lonely here? Don't you ever wish for something more exciting?" The monk smiled softly. "I used to act like I was beyond desire," he said. "Now I see that desire itself isn't the problem. The problem is when we hide from it. When I see desire clearly, it becomes a teacher, not a chain." He led his friend to a nearby stream. The water shimmered under the sunlight, flowing effortlessly around rocks and leaves. "Do you see this?" he asked. "The water doesn't pretend to be calm or wild. It just flows. Sometimes it's clear, sometimes muddy, but it never stops being itself. That is how I try to live now, not as the image of a monk, but as a human being who remembers to return to awareness in every moment." That evening, as the sun sank behind the mountains, the monk walked alone through the courtyard. The sound of wind moved through the trees, carrying the faint laughter of novices. He paused, feeling the cool air on his face. For the first time in his life, the calm he felt was not an act. It was the natural quiet that comes when one stops pretending to be anything other than what they are. He thought of his younger self, the monk who smiled too much, who feared disapproval, who mistook control for wisdom. He sent that younger version of himself a silent bow of gratitude. Without that struggle, he would never have learned what truth really meant. Years later, when he was an old man and his hair had turned silver, a student asked him, "Master, what is the essence of living truthfully?" He smiled, his eyes warm and clear. "It is the courage to see yourself completely," he said, "and the gentleness to accept what you see." The student hesitated, then asked, "Isn't that difficult?" The old monk laughed softly. "At first, yes. Because we have spent so long pretending to be wise, to be strong, to be kind, to be unafraid. But once you see through the performance, life becomes simple again. When you are angry, you know you are angry. When you are kind, you know you are kind. Nothing is hidden, and because nothing is hidden, there is peace." As night settled over the temple, the monk sat by the same stream he had shown his friend long ago. The moonlight danced upon the water, and he whispered to himself, "To live truthfully is to be awake, not perfect, just awake." His words faded into the quiet air, blending with the sound of flowing water. The story of this monk is not about renouncing emotion or achieving sainthood. It is about the bravery of turning inward, the willingness to look honestly at the self. The masks we wear, of calmness, of confidence, of control, are not wrong. They are simply the ways we've learned to survive. But when we cling to them, we lose the chance to meet ourselves as we truly are. The monk's journey reminds us that authenticity is not rebellion against others, but reconciliation with ourselves. It is the gentle return to truth, the moment when the pretending ends and the seeing begins. And in that moment, life itself becomes a meditation, not a performance to perfect, but a flow to witness, moment by moment, with awareness and love. Part 2. The teaching. True speech, mindful honesty, and awareness in communication. To live truthfully is not the same as saying everything that comes to mind. The Buddha never taught that sincerity means bluntness or unfiltered expression. Instead, he taught that truthfulness begins with awareness, with seeing the state of one's own mind before words ever leave the mouth. True speech does not arise from impulse, it arises from understanding. In the Noble Eightfold Path, right speech is one of the pillars of liberation. It means speaking what is true, but also what is kind, what is timely, and what leads to peace. Many of us confuse honesty with self-expression, believing that to be real is to say whatever we feel. But the Dharma invites us to look deeper. What is the mind behind the words? Are we speaking to connect or to wound, to bring clarity or to defend our ego? Mindful honesty begins in silence. When we pause to feel what's moving inside us before we speak, we see that not all feelings need to be expressed in the moment. Some need space, others simply need to be understood privately before being shared. The Buddha called this wise restraint, not repression, but awareness of cause and effect. Every emotion has an energy, and that energy travels through our words. Anger carries heat, fear carries contraction, compassion carries openness. When we speak without mindfulness, we transfer our turbulence to others. When we speak with awareness, we share calm. That is why the practice of living truthfully is not only about the content of our speech, but about the quality of presence behind it. Imagine two people arguing. One speaks truth, but with bitterness. The other listens, but with resentment. The words may be honest, but they do not bring understanding. They bring division. This is not truth in the Buddhist sense. It is merely reaction. True communication is not about winning an argument or proving a point. It is about awakening together, moment by moment, through the mirror of dialogue. In Buddhist teachings, this is called skillful speech. It asks not only, is it true, but also, is it beneficial? And, is it the right time? This triple reflection helps us align our words with compassion. Sometimes, the most truthful thing we can do is to stay silent until our heart is ready to speak with love. The Buddha often reminded his disciples that speech has the power to heal or to harm more deeply than any weapon. He compared words to arrows. Once released, they cannot be taken back. Mindful communication is therefore a practice of seeing before shooting, of checking the heart before releasing the word. To practice living truthfully, we must first become aware of the masks we wear in conversation. We hide behind politeness, sarcasm, or intellectual distance. We say what we think others want to hear, or we perform emotions we don't truly feel. These habits are not signs of deceit, but of fear. Fear of rejection, fear of vulnerability. When we speak from these masks, even gentle words can feel hollow. But when we speak from awareness, grounded in mindfulness and compassion, even difficult truths can bring healing. Imagine saying, I feel hurt, instead of, you hurt me. The first reveals, the second accuses. The difference is awareness. One invites understanding, the other invites defense. The Buddha encouraged his followers to speak as one polishing a jewel, meaning to use words carefully, refining them until they reflect light, not shadow. Living truthfully begins not with others, but with ourselves. Before we can communicate truthfully outwardly, we must learn to see inwardly, to recognize what we are actually feeling, wanting, or fearing in each moment. So much suffering in relationships arises not because we lie to others, but because we are not yet honest with ourselves. We confuse fatigue with anger, loneliness with resentment, pride with clarity. But when mindfulness illuminates these emotions, we begin to see clearly. This is the essence of right view, seeing things as they truly are, not as the ego wishes them to be. To live truthfully is to live from this seeing, not pretending to be calm when we are not pretending to know when we don't, and not pretending to agree when our heart is unsettled. Yet it also means expressing this truth with care, not as a weapon, but as a bridge. The Buddha's teachings show that the middle way applies to speech as much as to all other aspects of life. One extreme is suppression, silencing oneself for the sake of comfort or image. The other extreme is indulgence, speaking without awareness or compassion. The middle way is conscious expression, being honest and kind, clear and gentle, open and humble. This practice turns communication into meditation. When you speak mindfully, you are not simply exchanging information. You are observing the flow of awareness between two beings. You notice your tone, your breath, the rise and fall of your emotions. You feel how the body responds when you are heard or misunderstood. In these moments, dialogue becomes a field of awakening. The Buddha once asked his disciples, "When you speak, do your words lead to peace or to pain?" This question remains timeless. Before every conversation, we can pause and ask ourselves, am I speaking from awareness or from habit, from love or from fear? This simple reflection changes the entire quality of communication. To live truthfully also means to see that truth is not fixed. Our understanding of ourselves and others evolves with awareness. What felt true yesterday may no longer fit today. This is not inconsistency, it is growth. The mind, like water, must remain fluid to reflect reality accurately. Sometimes, the deepest honesty is admitting, "I don't know." When we allow ourselves this humility, space opens for genuine connection. Pretending to know keeps the heart closed. Curiosity keeps it open. The Buddha praised those who could say, "Let me look into this more deeply," rather than clinging to fixed opinions. In mindful communication, uncertainty becomes an ally of truth, not an enemy. There is also a kind of silence that is deeply truthful, not the silence of avoidance, but the silence of presence. When someone is in pain, we often rush to fill the space with advice or reassurance. Yet the most healing response is often quiet listening, a stillness that allows the other person's truth to unfold naturally. In that space, words become unnecessary because awareness itself is speaking. This kind of listening requires training. Most of us listen only enough to prepare our reply. But mindful listening means resting in awareness while the other speaks, letting go of the urge to fix or defend. It is an act of love. The Buddha said that deep listening is one of the highest forms of compassion because it allows another person to feel truly seen. When we learn to listen in this way, we also learn to listen to ourselves. The same mindfulness we offer others can be turned inward. We can pause before speaking and ask, what am I really feeling right now? What is my intention in saying this? Sometimes we discover that beneath anger lies sadness, beneath criticism lies fear, beneath withdrawal lies the wish to be understood. Seeing these layers brings tenderness. We begin to understand that truth without compassion is incomplete. The practice of living truthfully extends beyond words into action. The Buddha taught that right speech and right action arise from right intention. If the mind is rooted in greed, fear, or pride, even truthful words can cause harm. But if the heart is rooted in love, even silence can teach. So, before you speak, take a breath, feel your body, notice your mind, ask, what is true right now? What is kind? What will bring peace? These three questions are simple but powerful. They transform speech into mindfulness in motion. When practiced consistently, truthful living brings lightness to the heart, You no longer carry the burden of pretending or pleasing. You speak not to impress, but to connect. You listen not to respond, but to understand. Over time, communication becomes an art of awareness, a way of revealing, not performing. This is the essence of the Buddha's teaching on authenticity. To live truthfully is not to shout one's opinions louder, but to see and speak from clarity. It is not to expose every emotion, but to hold each one with awareness before offering it to the world. It is not to reject the masks we've worn, but to understand why we wore them, and to remove them gently when we are ready. When we practice this, the boundary between inner and outer truth dissolves. Our words begin to reflect our heart. Our heart begins to reflect our awareness. Communication becomes compassion in action, the living bridge between mindfulness and love. And in that bridge, something beautiful happens. The more truthfully we live, the less we need to prove. The more clearly we see, the more naturally we forgive. Honesty ceases to be a moral rule and becomes a state of peace, a gentle alignment between who we are, what we feel, and how we move through the world. In this way, living truthfully is not about perfection. It is about presence, moment by moment, breath by breath, learning to meet each word, each silence, each emotion with clear eyes and an open heart. When we do, life itself becomes a practice of awakening, simple, sincere, and profoundly free. Part 3. Reflection and Practice. The Art of Mindful Conversation and the 2-minute Emotion Practice. To live truthfully in our relationships, we must learn to communicate from awareness rather than impulse. We must learn to speak from understanding rather than reaction. This is one of the most delicate and profound forms of spiritual practice, because communication reveals who we are in real time, our attachments, fears, tenderness, and pride. The Buddha once said that a single mindful conversation can bring more peace than 1,000 unexamined words. But how often do we truly speak with awareness? Most of the time, our exchanges happen on autopilot. We speak quickly, defend instinctively, and listen only long enough to respond. We are not really in the conversation. We are inside our own narratives, trying to protect or prove ourselves. Yet every relationship, whether intimate or casual, offers an opportunity to practice truth with compassion. One simple but transformative way to begin is through what we can call the 3-step dialogue: feel, need, and request. It is a mindful structure that turns conversation into a field of mutual awareness rather than emotional crossfire. It is not a technique to manipulate or control others, but a way to ground communication in presence and kindness, a small but powerful form of daily Dharma. The first step is to name what you feel. This may sound simple, but it is not. Most people skip directly to accusation or reasoning, "You never listen," or "I just need you to stop doing that." But the Buddha taught that suffering arises from confusion, and confusion often comes from not seeing what we truly feel. By naming your emotion, sadness, fear, irritation, loneliness, disappointment, you make it visible without judgment. It is no longer hidden beneath defensiveness. To say, "I feel hurt," or "I feel disconnected," is not weakness. It is honesty in its most courageous form. When we reveal feeling instead of blame, the energy shifts immediately. The other person no longer feels attacked. Instead of hearing accusation, they hear vulnerability. In that vulnerability lies the possibility of connection. The second step is to identify the need underneath the feeling. Every emotion arises from an unmet need or a value that matters deeply to us. The need for respect, for rest, for reassurance, for being seen or heard. When we recognize the need behind the emotion, we touch the root instead of reacting to the surface. For example, beneath anger, there is often a need for understanding. Beneath frustration, a need for cooperation. Beneath sadness, a need for closeness or care. By expressing the need, we move from reaction to truth. Instead of saying, "You never listen," we can say, "When I speak and you look at your phone, I feel unseen. I need your attention so I can feel connected." This is not manipulation. It is mindful truth, clear, kind, and unarmed. The third step is to make a conscious request. A request is an invitation, not a demand. It is a bridge between two hearts. When made from mindfulness, it carries gentleness. It says, "I am aware of my need, and I trust your freedom to respond." For instance, you might say, "Could we take 10 minutes each evening to talk without our phones? Or would you be willing to tell me when something I do bothers you, instead of holding it in?" When spoken with presence, these small requests become seeds of harmony. In Buddhist practice, this three-step structure embodies compassion in action, awareness of one's own inner world, wisdom, expression without blame, ethics, and sensitivity to the other's autonomy, loving kindness. Through it, truth becomes not a weapon, but a way of awakening together. Of course, even with mindfulness, emotions can still rise suddenly and strongly. There will be moments when awareness is lost, and we find ourselves speaking from hurt or fear. That is why another small but essential practice accompanies mindful dialogue, the 2-minute emotion practice, also known as naming the feeling. Whenever conflict arises and the heart begins to tighten, pause for just 2 minutes. Close your eyes if possible, or simply breathe gently. Then, silently name what you feel: anger, sadness, fear, confusion, shame, longing. You don't have to analyze or fix it. Just name it softly in your mind, the way a mother might name a crying child. This act of naming is incredibly powerful. Neuroscience now confirms what the Buddha taught intuitively. When we name an emotion, we create distance from it. We stop being inside the feeling and begin observing it. The emotion is still there, but now we are aware of it. Awareness is the space in which transformation happens. Imagine someone saying something that stings. The immediate impulse is to defend or counterattack. But if, in that very moment, you take a breath and silently say, "Anger is here," you are already free. You have stepped out of the storm and into the sky above it. From that sky, you can choose how to respond, not react. The Buddha compared this to seeing a snake in the road. If you recognize it clearly, you can step aside safely. But if you don't see it, you step on it and get bitten. Mindfulness helps us see the emotional snakes before they strike, the patterns of reactivity that create unnecessary suffering. Over time, this 2-minute practice trains the mind to remain clear, even in difficult moments. You begin to sense emotions as waves, not enemies. They rise, they fall, they pass. Some are gentle ripples, others are fierce storms, but none last forever. When you see this directly, honesty becomes easier. You can speak the truth of your emotion without being consumed by it. For example, instead of saying, "You always make me angry," you can say, "There's anger in me right now, and I'm observing it." This simple shift changes everything. The first sentence blames, the second reveals. One closes the heart, the other opens it. This is what it means to be mindful in communication. not to suppress emotion, but to see it clearly before expressing it. To speak not from the storm, but from the awareness that watches the storm. The Buddha often said that mindfulness is the gatekeeper of the mind. It lets in what is wholesome and prevents what is unwholesome from taking root. In conversation, mindfulness acts as a guardian of truth. It ensures that what we share comes from clarity, not confusion. Practicing the 2-minute emotion technique regularly also builds what modern teachers call emotional literacy, the ability to recognize and name subtle feelings. This helps us understand not just ourselves, but others as well. When we can say, "I see you are anxious," or "It seems you're disappointed," with gentle awareness, we create safety. Safety opens the door for authenticity. The Buddha's path was never about erasing emotion, but transforming our relationship with it. When anger or sadness arises, instead of labeling it bad, we can see it as energy, asking for attention. The energy of anger, when transformed by mindfulness, becomes courage. The energy of sadness becomes compassion. The energy of fear becomes humility. Every emotion, when held in awareness, becomes fuel for awakening. As these practices deepen, the 3-step dialogue and the 2-minute emotion awareness, a subtle miracle unfolds. Conversations that once led to tension begin to soften. Misunderstandings dissolve more quickly, and even when conflict still arises, it feels less personal. You start to see the humanity behind every harsh word, the fear behind the anger, the longing behind the complaint. This shift from judgment to compassion is the essence of truthful living. It doesn't mean you suppress your truth or endure unkindness silently. It means you speak with clarity and love. You express your feelings without attacking, and you listen without defending. Over time, this way of being changes not only relationships, but the mind itself. The boundaries between inner practice and outer life disappear. Every conversation becomes an opportunity to return to presence. Every disagreement, a mirror showing where more awareness is needed. When truth and compassion meet, communication becomes healing. Words are no longer tools of ego, but instruments of understanding. Even silence becomes alive, a shared stillness where both people rest in authenticity. At the end of each day, you can reflect gently. Was I mindful in my speech today? Did I listen deeply? Did I name my emotions instead of projecting them? These reflections are not for guilt, but for growth. Awareness is not about perfection. It is about learning to begin again and again. The Buddha once said, "Better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace." To live truthfully is to cultivate such words, words born of awareness, seasoned with kindness, grounded in authenticity. So, tonight, as you rest, take a breath and feel your own presence. No need to pretend, no need to perform. Let your awareness hold whatever is here, tiredness, peace, sadness, or gratitude. Name it softly, breathe, and let it be. This is where truthful living begins, in the quiet honesty of a single breath, in the tender recognition of what is real. From that space, all speech becomes sacred, all relationships become practice, and life itself becomes a conversation with awakening. Chapter 6, From Personal Love to Boundless Compassion. Part 1. The Story, the husband who cared for his ailing wife. There once was a man who loved his wife deeply. They had spent many years together, sharing laughter, daily routines, quiet meals, and the countless invisible threads that form between two people who have lived side by side for a long time. Their love had never been dramatic. It was built of small gestures, the morning cup of tea, the hand on the shoulder, the patient listening at the end of a long day. Then one winter, she fell ill. At first, it seemed like a passing sickness, a fever, some weakness, but soon it became clear that it was something more serious. The doctors spoke in careful tones. They used words like long-term care and uncertain outcome. The man felt his chest tighten as if the world had suddenly narrowed into this one fragile life before him. In the beginning, he cared for her with great energy and devotion. He cooked, cleaned, and stayed by her side through the long nights. Each morning, he whispered gently, "I'm here." But as weeks turned to months, exhaustion began to creep in. Her body weakened. Her pain increased. Some days, she would grow irritable, frustrated, or fall into silence. He tried to be patient, but inside, he often felt helpless, even angry at fate. There were nights when he sat alone by her bedside, watching her sleep, his heart full of conflicting emotions, love, fatigue, fear, and sorrow. Why her, he would think. Why must this happen to the person I love most? He longed for the days when they could walk together, laugh together, live as they used to. But now, life had become a series of small, heavy tasks. Feeding her, cleaning her wounds, adjusting her pillows. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, he went out into the garden behind their house. The sky was dark and full of stars. He felt anger rising inside, anger at the sickness, at the unfairness of it all. He clenched his fists and whispered, "I can't do this anymore." At that moment, his old teacher, a monk who had guided him in his younger years, happened to visit. Seeing the man's distress, the teacher said softly, "You have been caring for her with great effort, but perhaps you have not yet discovered the true heart of compassion." The man frowned, confused and defensive. "What do you mean? I have given everything. I barely sleep. I barely eat. Isn't that compassion?" The monk smiled kindly. "That is love mixed with attachment and fear," he said. "It is still beautiful, but it carries suffering. Compassion without wisdom becomes heavy because it still says, 'I want you to be well so that I can be at peace.' True compassion says, 'May you be free from suffering, even if I must face discomfort.'" The words struck him deeply. "But how do I do that?" he asked quietly. The monk looked at him for a long moment. "First, you must breathe again," he said. "Right now, you are trying to hold her pain inside you, but pain cannot be carried. It can only be understood. Sit with your breath. Let the breath remind you that both of you belong to the same impermanent flow of life. Neither can be owned, neither can be saved. Only understood, only loved." That night, the man sat beside his sleeping wife, breathing as the monk had instructed. He placed his hand lightly over hers and whispered silently, "May you be free from suffering. May I be free from fear. May our love become spacious enough to hold even this." Something shifted inside him, a quiet recognition. He realized that his love had always been bound by a silent demand, that she remain well, that she remain his. But now, as he looked at her fragile form, he saw love in a different way, not as possession, but as care for her freedom, whatever that might mean. Over the following days, he continued to care for her, feeding her, bathing her, helping her sit up when she was weak. But the energy was different. He no longer rushed. He no longer clung to the hope that she would get better. He simply did what was needed in each moment, with tenderness and presence. When she cried in pain, He held her hand without trying to make it stop. When she smiled faintly, he smiled back, not because things were okay, but because that moment was real. His heart softened in a way he had never experienced before. There was still sadness, but it no longer consumed him. There was love, but it no longer demanded a return. What had begun as duty had become something quieter, purer, compassion, rooted in understanding. One morning, she looked at him and said weakly, "You've changed." He smiled and asked, "How so?" She replied, "You used to look at me as if I were slipping away. Now you look at me as if I'm already home." He felt tears rise but did not hide them. He simply nodded and said, "Maybe we're both learning what love really means." Weeks later, as her body began to fail, she passed peacefully in her sleep, her hand still resting in his. There was grief, yes, deep and raw, but also peace. He no longer saw her death as an ending. It was part of the same flow that had brought them together, the same river of impermanence that carried them both. Months after her passing, he returned to the monastery where his teacher lived. The monk welcomed him with a gentle smile and asked, "What have you learned from this journey?" The man bowed his head. "I have learned that love begins as warmth, but becomes liberation when joined with wisdom. Before, I wanted to keep her safe. Now, I simply wish her peace, wherever she is, and I wish the same peace for myself and for all beings." The teacher nodded. That is the difference between affection and compassion. Affection is beautiful but limited. It seeks comfort and closeness. Compassion is boundless. It seeks freedom for all. When we love without clinging, every act of care becomes sacred. The man continued to visit the monastery often. Sometimes he joined the monks in tending to the sick, the elderly, and the lonely. As he washed another's hands or wiped another's forehead, he felt his wife's presence in every gesture. He realized that caring for one person deeply had taught him to care for all beings more wisely. His love had not disappeared. It had transformed from personal attachment into spacious compassion. The sorrow of losing her had opened his heart rather than closing it. What was once my love had become love itself. One evening, as he helped a frail old monk drink his tea, he remembered his teacher's words, "When wisdom joins the heart, love no longer binds, it liberates." He smiled softly, realizing that this was what his wife had been teaching him all along, in her silence, in her suffering, in her gentle courage. Years later, as he grew older, he often sat beneath a tree near the monastery, watching the sun rise. Visitors would see him sitting there, serene and content, and assume he was meditating. In truth, he was simply remembering, not with longing, but with gratitude. He would whisper to the morning light, "Thank you, my love, for showing me the way from care to compassion, from fear to freedom." And as the wind passed through the leaves, it felt to him as if she were answering, not with words, but with the quiet presence of all things interconnected. The story of this husband and wife is not just about loss, but about awakening through love. It reminds us that relationships are not only places of comfort, but sacred grounds of transformation. When love is illuminated by wisdom, it ceases to be a transaction of emotion and becomes a practice of liberation. To love another being deeply is to be given the opportunity to see beyond mine and yours. It is to touch the truth that every act of care, when performed with awareness, is an offering to life itself. In that way, love does not end when the body fails or when distance appears. True love, the kind that has ripened into compassion, continues quietly, endlessly, like the breath, like the river, like the infinite sky. Part 2. The teaching, wisdom that frees the heart. In the Buddha's teachings, love and compassion are not two separate qualities. They are the same energy, expressed through different degrees of wisdom. Love, when still bound by desire or attachment, seeks closeness, safety, and belonging. Compassion, when joined with understanding, expands beyond the boundaries of me and you. It sees suffering as a shared condition of all beings and responds not from need, but from clarity. Most people begin with personal love. We fall in love, care for family, protect those dear to us, and feel joy when they are well. This is natural. It is the heart's first language. But the Buddha pointed out that love that depends on conditions will always carry shadow and tension. We want our loved ones to be happy, but secretly we want them to be happy with us. We want them to be safe, but also to remain within our grasp. This subtle craving makes love heavy, even when it appears gentle. When wisdom arises, love transforms. The Buddha called this metta, loving kindness that is unconditional, and karuna, compassion that arises from seeing suffering clearly. True compassion is love, purified of fear and expectation. It does not bind, it liberates. Think of the husband in our story. At first, his love was full of warmth, but also full of anxiety. He wanted his wife to live, not only for her sake, but because he could not imagine life without her. That is the tender trap of human affection. The more we love, the more we cling. The Buddha understood this deeply, which is why he never told his followers to suppress love, but to refine it, to let it grow wiser, broader, and freer. When we begin to see love as a practice, not as possession, every relationship becomes a field of awakening. In marriage, in friendship, even in conflict, the Dharma can be lived. Love becomes a form of meditation, an opportunity to observe the heart's movements, to recognize attachment, to soften control. In Buddhist psychology, the heart has two wings: wisdom, panna, and compassion, karuna. If love has only compassion but no wisdom, it becomes overwhelming. We absorb the pain of others and lose our balance. If love has only wisdom but no compassion, it becomes cold and detached, a philosophy without warmth. True liberation arises when both wings move together, when the heart loves with understanding, and the mind understands with love. The Buddha illustrated this with a simple metaphor: a mother caring for her only child. She protects the child with tenderness, yet she knows that one day the child must walk alone. Her love does not possess, it empowers. This is the model of wise compassion, caring fully, yet without clinging. The husband's transformation, from anxious caregiver to peaceful companion, is the very journey of compassion. He learned to love not because things were easy, but because he saw clearly that love is not about control. He could not stop his wife's illness. He could not promise her health, but he could offer her presence, and that presence became a gift beyond measure. In the Metta Sutta, the Buddha taught, even as a mother protects with her life her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. This verse does not ask us to love everyone equally in feeling, but to expand our understanding until our heart no longer excludes. Compassion begins with one person, a partner, a child, a friend, but when seen deeply, it reveals the universal condition of all beings. The husband's care for his wife became the doorway to caring for all who suffer. His personal love matured into impersonal compassion. The path from love to compassion often passes through suffering. Pain softens the heart and exposes what is fragile. In caring for another's illness, we are forced to face impermanence, that everything we hold dear will change, decay, and pass away. This is not a cruel truth. It is the truth that awakens us to the urgency of love. When we truly see impermanence, we stop wasting time in resentment or complaint. We learn to love more gently, more presently, without the illusion of forever. In this way, suffering becomes the teacher of compassion. The Buddha himself experienced deep loss, the death of loved ones, the impermanence of his own youth, the fragility of life. Out of that seeing arose not despair, but vast compassion for all beings caught in the same cycle. Compassion is not born from avoiding pain, but from meeting it fully, without aversion. When we face another's suffering, as the husband did with his wife, something profound happens. We begin to see that their pain and our pain are not separate. Their fear echoes ours. Their longing mirrors ours. In that shared humanity, the boundary between self and other dissolves. This is the wisdom that transforms love into compassion, the direct realization that all beings seek the same thing, to be free from suffering, to be at peace. The Buddha described this in the 4 divine abodes: metta, loving kindness; karuna, compassion; mudita, sympathetic joy; and upekkha, equanimity. Together, they form a complete heart, one that can love deeply without being crushed by sorrow. Compassion, karuna, allows us to feel another's pain without drowning in it. Loving kindness, metta, allows us to wish well for all beings, even those who hurt us. Sympathetic joy, mudita, allows us to rejoice in others' happiness instead of comparing. Equanimity, upekkha, allows us to remain steady amid change, neither clinging nor pushing away. These are not distant ideals, they are daily practices. We cultivate them by being fully present with what is, a moment of care, a moment of frustration, a moment of letting go. In each situation, we ask gently, what does love look like when joined with wisdom? Sometimes it looks like staying. Sometimes it looks like releasing. Sometimes it is silence. Sometimes it is a single word spoken with gentleness. In the husband's story, his compassion matured precisely because he stayed through discomfort. He learned that true love is not tested by pleasure but by pain. It is not about how much we enjoy another's company, but how much presence we can offer when joy disappears. That presence, when guided by mindfulness, becomes sacred. The Buddha called this the perfection of patience, the ability to stay open when the heart wants to close. When we practice this, our love becomes stronger, more spacious. We begin to care without calculation, to give without fear of loss. In the light of this understanding, marriage itself can be seen as a sacred practice, not a social contract, but a daily meditation on selflessness. Two people walk together, reflecting each other's joys and wounds, learning through conflict, softening through forgiveness. When one suffers, both are invited to awaken. When one grows, both evolve. The relationship becomes not a refuge from impermanence, but a training ground for compassion. The Buddha did not separate spiritual life from ordinary life. He taught that enlightenment is not found in isolation from human experience, but in the middle of it, in washing a cup, comforting a partner, listening with patience, forgiving again and again. These small acts, when done with awareness, polish the mirror of the heart. When we love wisely, we stop, asking, how long will this last? And begin to ask, how deeply can I be present right now? That question frees us. It removes the anxiety of control and replaces it with gratitude. As love expands, we begin to see others' happiness as our own, others' pain as our own. The boundary between this person I care for and those strangers out there grows thin. We start to recognize that every being, the bird outside the window, the neighbor we barely know, the stranger across the world, is also longing to be safe, to be loved, to be free from pain. This is the seed of universal compassion. The husband's transformation was not only emotional but spiritual. His care for one person became his entryway into awakening. Each small act of tenderness became a prayer. Each moment of grief became an opening to see the nature of life as it truly is, fleeting, fragile, and yet profoundly sacred. When we care for someone in suffering, a partner, a parent, a child, we are offered the same invitation. Can we love without holding on? Can we serve without seeking reward? Can we see beyond my pain and your pain into the vast, shared ocean of life itself? This is the heart of Buddhist compassion. It does not erase personal love. It expands it until it includes all beings. When we understand this, even the smallest act of care becomes a step toward awakening. And so, the Buddha's teaching gently reminds us, love that clings seeks comfort. Love that understands seeks freedom. When wisdom enters love, the heart opens wide enough for the whole world to rest inside. Part 3. Reflection and Practice. The Compassion Calendar and the Body Relaxation Meditation. Compassion is not a feeling to wait for. It is a practice to nurture each day. The Buddha often said that small, consistent actions of kindness transform the mind more deeply than grand emotions that fade. In relationships, this means making compassion visible, turning it into gestures, attention, and care that heal both ourselves and those we love. One gentle way to begin is through what we might call the compassion calendar. Each week, take a few moments to plan 2 simple acts. 1 act of care for your partner and 1 act of care for yourself. It could be as humble as making breakfast with mindfulness, leaving a note of gratitude, or simply offering a long, quiet hug. The act for yourself might be resting without guilt, taking a mindful walk, or spending 5 minutes in silence. Compassion for others and compassion for oneself must grow together. Otherwise, love becomes sacrifice instead of balance. As you practice, remember that these actions are not about perfection. Some days, your energy will be full. Other days, you will feel empty. What matters is the intention to show up again and again with awareness. Each act is a small seed of liberation. Each moment of patience, a petal of wisdom. At the end of each week, reflect gently. Did I love with awareness? Did I offer kindness without expectation? Did I also care for the one who cares, myself? This reflection is not to judge but to learn. Compassion deepens through observation, not through force. Before sleep, you can close the day with a short body relaxation meditation, an 8 to 10 minute practice that softens the body and opens the heart. Lie down comfortably, close your eyes, and bring attention to your breath. Feel the air move in and out, gentle and natural. Then slowly scan through your body, from the crown of the head to the soles of the feet. With each breath, silently say, relax. As you reach each part of the body, let it soften: the forehead, the jaw, the shoulders, the chest, the hands, the belly, the legs. Imagine a wave of warm light flowing through you, melting away tension, carrying away all the small worries of the day. When the body begins to settle, place your hand over your heart. Breathe gently into that space and whisper inwardly, may I be peaceful, may Those I love be peaceful. May all beings everywhere be peaceful. Let the words dissolve into quiet awareness. Rest there, as if floating in still water, held by compassion itself. Practiced regularly, this small ritual prepares the heart for rest and the mind for clarity. It reminds us that compassion is not a distant ideal, but something we can live, breathe, and embody in every moment. In the stillness before sleep, you may feel the quiet truth the Buddha once spoke, that love and wisdom, when joined, have no boundary. What begins as care for one person expands naturally, endlessly, until the whole world becomes the field of your compassion. Conclusion. In the quiet light of reflection, we see that the bond between two people, husband and wife, partners, companions, is never an accident. It is not given merely for comfort or pleasure, nor to satisfy the ego's endless desires. It is a sacred field of practice, where two souls meet not to complete each other, but to awaken together. Every joy, every conflict, every silence is a part of that teaching. When we begin to see things as they truly are, we loosen our grip on how we think love should be. We stop clinging to the illusion of control and open to the simple truth of impermanence. With each moment of awareness, attachment softens, understanding deepens, and love expands beyond self-interest into genuine compassion. To love wisely is to see clearly. To see clearly is to love without fear. This is the path of understanding, the quiet transformation from desire to peace, from mine to ours, from personal affection to universal compassion. May you and your loved one walk this path with gentle steps. May your home become a small temple of mindfulness, a place where awareness, patience, and tenderness are practiced daily. And may your heart continue to widen, embracing not only the one beside you, but all beings who share the same longing to love and to be free. Thank you for listening, for breathing, for being here with Moonlight Temple. If this journey has brought calm or insight to your heart, you are warmly invited to stay, to subscribe, and to keep walking with us as we continue to share stories, meditations, and teachings that illuminate the way home to peace. May all beings be free from suffering. May all hearts awaken to love.